I heard dirt burst across grass while my capybara launched the lizard. Dirt sprayed across my boots while the lizard vanished beyond the ridge. My capybara bared its teeth, planted its paws, and charged again. Blue fire tore past my ear. I dropped behind a fallen trunk. The trunk cracked, showering bark and mud across my coat. A pink-horned creature blinked beside the wreckage near my knee. I grabbed it before another blast reached the clearing. Smoke and wounded villagers forced me to scan every road behind us. I marked the valley route, still standing with both hands. The capybara bought space to raise defenses before monsters returned. I turned that ridiculous launch into protection for every home nearby. Those towers still had to survive the next monster wave. Before any of that madness, my story wore a title big enough to make a promise. I was Lloyd Frontera, and I had no idea how brutally expensive that name was about to become. The setup looked simple from a distance, me and a white-haired swordsman back to back with trouble blazing behind us. Simple was a lie. The estate was already waiting to eat us alive. A windy mountain morning found me flying a strange flag above a hill of tiny animals.
My name is Suho Kim.
I announced, then I corrected myself.
In this world, my name is Lloyd Frontera.
That was the story I had somehow fallen into. I drove my shovel into the hill, and a glowing blueprint spread beneath my boots before towering grids erupted across the valley. An average civil engineering student had turned an entire world upside down. Then I heard him call out,
"Javier."
"Yes, Master Lloyd." I threw my arms wide and laughed because this was all money.
"Have you finally lost it, sir?"
Javier asked. A title card dragged me back a few years, when an alarm woke Suho Kim with the ridiculous promise of a fresh start. Suho Kim barely had time to wonder why he had slept after an all-nighter before the system popped open a cheerful message.
"Good luck, you've got this."
I had no wish, no luck, and no drink. Then the road vanished under me.
Am I in a different world?
The fall ended with a health alert, and I realized exactly why the situation felt cursed. I had become a side character in Night of Blood and Iron, a novel I knew too well.
"Master Lloyd."
A voice called Javier Strahan had come for me. Javier looked exactly like the book's protagonist, the swordsman destined to roam the country as the knight of my lord across Frontera. I tried to correct him.
"I called your name, but I never called you a hooligan."
He smiled anyway.
"I can see that you are upset already."
Javier Strahan told me I had no idea how I ended up here, then reminded me that I drank until dawn, trashed a pub, and passed out on the road home.
"Master Lloyd, you will probably have to pay for the furniture."
He said, "Great." My first day as Lloyd Frontera came with a repair bill. Javier looked at me and said,
"Our family has a lot of debt, do not worry."
That was a strange thing to hear from the novel's protagonist, because I knew the boarding house disaster had killed Lloyd after the last chapter. Then the system's message hit me. Damn, this was the beginning. The system confirmed it. A random wish had sent me into Night of Blood and Iron, so I was not just wearing Lloyd Frontera's face. I had landed at the story's starting line. At the manor, Lloyd's mother, Marbella Frontera, asked,
"You took things out of the pub last night."
I tried to answer carefully, because I had to clean up whatever Lloyd left behind.
"Yes, okay, I will do it."
I said. Marbella and Javier stared at me like the system had swapped my brain too. Outside, even the villagers froze when they saw us coming. That reaction was not subtle. The villagers scattered before Javier and me, and one kid slammed his window shut rather than make eye contact. The system pinged. "The villagers absolutely detest you." I had noticed. When I asked why Javier was following me, he answered,
"His lordship ordered me to protect you."
I decided my first job was fixing my reputation, because a debt-free Frontera was the only version of this life worth keeping. The system opened Lloyd's skills. Human scum made people dislike me on sight, while rowdy drunkard turned me into an absolute ass.
"The pub is over here."
Javier said. So much for reform. At the pub door, Javier went quiet and said,
"Let us go in."
Inside, the smashed tables and ruined wall made my drunken damage painfully clear. I bowed to the pub owner.
"Forgive me, everything that happened last night was my fault."
He looked terrified instead of relieved. I tried again.
Well, I guess I am sorry.
The system called my apology insincere, and the pub owner begged me not to apologize anyway. Javier explained that replacing the furniture mattered, especially because the owner's sick mother needed care. My old behavior had left damage deeper than broken chairs. The pub still needed a furnace and a single fireplace, but the floor plan had one fatal flaw.
Unless they have an Ondal floor.
I followed the footsteps, pictured the heat moving through the building, and the answer hit me.
I've got it.
A light bulb went off in my head, then the whole design snapped into place like a blueprint, finally finding its missing line.
If I build them in this world, they would definitely sell.
That was the real advantage of Lloyd Frontera. I had civil engineering knowledge nobody here could even imagine. The real Suho Kim could do what this setting could not.
In school, I majored in civil engineering.
During military service, I had also worked construction, so those plans and job site memories were suddenly worth more than any sword.
Let's go back to the pub.
My first order was waiting. The system pinged with a new rule. Relationship points could be earned by improving bonds with key characters.
Current RP total 0.
That sounded harmless, but it turned social survival into a resource system. I stared at the floating windows, already wondering whose opinion I had to repair first. RP was basically like experience, except I earned it through people instead of monsters. Javier Srahan, my white-haired swordsman, gave me the first live test when the system flashed his approval rating.
30.
It climbed to 40 after I pointed out he was loyal, small gain, useful mechanic. Back at the pub, I finally saw why the compensation mattered.
The pub owner is looking at you suspiciously.
The system was right because human scum, my passive skill that made people dislike me on sight, had poisoned this meeting before I opened my mouth. Damn skill. The owner called me garbage, then my plan changed the entire room.
Oh yeah, it worked.
I had gotten my first order, which meant the pub had chosen to trust my construction work over Lloyd's reputation. Javier did not look impressed.
Are you coming with me?
Javier called my thinking cognitive distortion.
You believe someone would do this and treat you based on the past.
He was right about the danger, but smiling would make the owner look less like a target and more like a customer.
Owner and his mother make them smile.
I was Lloyd Frontera now, and that flimsy first house would become the foundation of my money-making. I trained the workers to dig, set the timber frame, pack clay into the walls, and raise the roof.
It took a week.
My lungs burned. Javier Srahan watched from outside, wondering where I had learned it. After a week of work, I was still chopping wood like the weakest laborer alive.
Ugh, I'm so tired.
Javier Srahan took the hatchet before I could finish complaining.
What do you need me to do?
I told him.
Thin little pieces, 2 hands long, 1 hand wide, and 1 finger thick.
Javier Srahan gave the log one swing, and it exploded into uniform boards instead of splinters.
Whoa, 2 lines. Is someone about to become a master swordsman?
I had stumbled onto a construction cheat code. His blade made lumber with clean dimensions on the first pass, skipping a whole workshop's worth of equipment.
Who needs modern equipment?
I pressed Javier because a good design meant nothing if we built it at a snail's pace.
Help me build this house more efficiently, Javier.
He stared like I had assigned him a prison sentence.
Do you have to do this?
I smiled and lifted the shovel.
We'll do it together.
Javier Srahan and I kept digging, shoveling, and pounding until the roof stood over us. The work had finally become a house.
Construction complete.
I raised my fist. It was not glamorous, it was proof. I nailed up a crooked logo and brought Javier Srahan along to check the finished house.
Javier, shall we go find out?
Once the cook fired the floor heating setup, warmth filled the room and smoke rolled from the chimney. The owners collapsed into relieved tears. That was the point. The old couple beamed as heat curled through the room, and their happiness made the whole project feel real. Javier Srahan watched their reaction in silence before admitting.
Just as he said.
Their gratitude changed the mood around me. This was more than a house warming up. It was a promise keeping people warm. The system pinged for me, Lloyd Frontera. Javier Strahan's approval climbed by 29, then it awarded 36 relationship points for improving our bond.
You just think this house needs a larger garage after all.
I am not. The timber cost was ugly, but this finished house became my model for everything I meant to build next. A few days later, Lloyd Frontera, had villagers lined up outside because the pub's warm floor had made construction look profitable.
Style A is an annex for this office. Style B is a replacement house for the neighboring village.
I warned them that lumber costs had doubled, but their distrust stayed put. Then I decided to check the city's market myself. Before I could leave, Arcos Frontera, my father, stopped me cold with,
"What do you think you are doing?"
The system immediately dinged and showed his approval dropping by 20. That was ugly. I had just tried to build Frontera up, and my own father had decided I was a problem. At dinner, I braced for the lecture and asked whether he planned to stop me from building. Arcos kept eating, then said,
"Let's keep this short. The pub owner ordered a blue room, so build one."
His best rude father voice had missed its target. He was letting me work. Arcos had already cleared every family order and put his men on lumber, though he warned that the timber would not stretch forever.
"Don't worry, I can get us out of this trouble soon."
I had heard that exact kind of reassurance before, and the memory of getting fleeced for money made my stomach turn. My father honestly thought everything would work out, but I knew better.
"I'm not going to be miserable again because of stupid money."
The promised timber arrived only half delivered, and 2 moneylenders marched into the estate right behind it. So much for the easy part. Moneylender Meadowloaf and moneylender Shiloh came demanding payment 5 days after our deal, even though the lumber had barely arrived.
"If you continue to drag your feet, we will have no choice but to take action."
Arcos snapped back, but I caught a new arrival at the door and grinned. Perfect timing. With Javier Strahan's approval now at 36, the system offered me a way to spend those relationship points on abilities.
You can invest your RP on gaining abilities.
That was the real prize. Instead of buying a vague stat bump, I could purchase construction knowledge that solved the exact bottleneck strangling my plans. The system displayed basic surveying for 15 RP and basic design for 20, then I chose surveying first.
"This is for real. I don't need anyone's help. I can just see it all with my own eyes."
Green light flooded over me as the skill installed. Now I could measure the land myself, which made every future build less dependent on somebody else's guesswork. Alone beneath the moon, Lloyd Frontera, checked the empty field and called up the random summon game, a 50 RP gamble that could turn spare points into a useful asset.
"Start."
The system answered with a spinning cloud of glowing gears. Well, that looked expensive. The gears locked into a magic circle so tiny and obnoxiously loud that I could barely take it seriously. Then a tiny hamster dropped out, bounced at my boots, and started scampering around like it owned the place.
"Is that it?"
I had spent 50 RP on pocket lint with ears. I wrote the summon off as a dud, but Peepadong, the hamster who had just materialized, protested with determined little squeaks.
"What can you do?"
Peepadong spat up a soggy manual, then demanded sunflower seeds and plenty of love. A needy pet summon was not impressive. The enclosed seeds, though, were clearly the real pull. The manual finally gave me the rules. A red sunflower seed made Peepadong gigantic for 12 hours, while a blue one shrank him back before that timer expired. That was broken because the same summon could become heavy equipment, then vanish before anyone asked questions.
"Let's see your size."
Peepadong inhaled the red seed, and the answer hit me hard. Peepadong did not stop at human size. He shot past 15 feet, then 30, and suddenly my ridiculous hamster could move Earth by the ton. The system pinged 3 skills in quick succession: digging level 1, packing dirt level 2, and cheek pockets level 1.
Now we're talking.
That summon had become a construction crew by itself. Peepadong promptly spat up a mountain of packed dirt and drenched me in the process. Gross. Still, I had my heavy equipment and the trick was hiding it in plain sight.
I'm a summoning master.
With a book as my cover story, I could explain the monster hamster away and move on to the labor problem. At Frontera, I lined up 30 soldiers from Lord Frontera's barony and handed them shovels. They expected soldiering, but the Baron's debt had handed me free labor, which made this workforce too useful to waste.
Safety first.
Their first lesson was simple: an army exists to do work. I pointed at the clay they had dug all night. Peepadong had dug that entire clay pile in 30 minutes, so I ordered the soldiers to haul it to the construction site. Their faces fell, expected. Then Newman, the senior knight in Lord Fronter's barony, stepped in.
What are you asking my men here to do?
I had expected that confrontation. Newman stood above Bayern, while Javier Strahan was the novel's protagonist and the third knight. I, Lloyd Frontera, watched Newman, the senior knight of Lord Frontera's barony, decide that the Baron's supposed betrayal made me the first target.
Sir Newman, your guts look like they're timed to explode.
Bayern, the knight beneath him, called that dishonorable. I only smiled. Newman accused me of using the soldiers for personal profit, and I calmly agreed.
No, that sounds right.
Then I offered him the only lesson he seemed ready to understand.
If you want a beat down.
His temper snapped, and the men around us froze as the clash finally started. Newman came out of that exchange bloodied and furious, which was the whole point.
You scoundrel, did you just insult a knight's honor?
I had poked the exact wound he could not ignore, then raised my shovel like a challenge.
Let's do this thing, a duel.
Newman's confidence vanished when my shovel stopped close enough for him to see the edge. The duel had gone from a knight correcting a hoodlum to a very personal mistake. He could only stare, then everything paused on his face. Javier Strahan, my white-haired swordsman, asked whether I still planned to cut down the old hooligan.
Of course not.
The important part was his talent, because a low-level swordsman who could keep improving was a resource worth more than one bruised ego. Javier had been too sharp from the start, so I finally made my move.
Teach me how to use a sword.
He refused immediately.
First of all, my job is only to watch you.
Fair enough, his sword was the kind of advantage I wanted to understand, and he knew I was plotting something. Javier asked how I knew about sword ranks, and I gave him the safest answer available.
It's in this book.
I explained that a sword master sat at the top of the ladder, while Javier's talent meant he could eventually reach that rank. That was why I kept pushing. Javier finally agreed to try, and I immediately baited him with my insomnia.
Of course I know how to cure it.
His cure was brutal in the most efficient way possible. He put me to sleep.
So what did I do?
I listened to the magic spell and waited for the opening. Lloyd Frontera had just made concrete work look easy enough to embarrass the local experts, and Javier Strahan finally saw the problem. I grinned at him.
Now your swordsmanship is mine.
Javier did not look impressed. Still, I walked off with my plan intact, because irritating a genius was apparently the fastest route to free lessons. Javier tried to ignore me while I sprinted circles around him and shouted.
Teach me some skills.
That was the whole pressure point. My annoying brat passive had reached level 4, turning my shameless pestering into a debuff that kept demanding attention, and Javier's patience finally snapped. I celebrated too early.
Now what? I'm going to finish running.
Then the system pinged. Annoying brat had reached level 4, but my legs were already failing. That stumble dragged me back to Suho Kim, the kid I had been, alone in a cramped boarding room and desperate to become stronger. Back then, Suho Kim had hauled construction materials up apartment stairs for day labor, even when the load cut into my shoulders.
Just a little more.
Every step hurt, yet I held onto one thought: if I kept moving, I could earn a better life. That tiny light was all I had. The memory left me shaking in the dark. I reached for that fading light, saw my old self collapse beside a spilled load of blocks, and remembered why quitting had never been an option.
Compared to that pain, this is nothing.
Under the moon, I forced my body forward again. Javier watched me keep running until he finally gave in.
If you are so determined, then I will teach you my sword fighting techniques.
That mattered more than a friendly promise. The system immediately raised Javier Strahan's approval rating by 28 and paid me 1 relationship point reward. My total hit 29. Arcos Frontera had heard enough and decided to stop my duel. Marbella Frontera pushed back, warning him.
Do enough not to hurt him seriously.
Arcos agreed to pull his punches, but his thoughts were colder. He pictured cutting off the source of my trouble and pinning it on Baron and Baroness Tidon as suicide. A month passed and the estate had become a noisy worksite. Arcos approached me with a shovel in hand.
Are you ready, young master?
I answered by kicking the blade loose and swinging it at him. That was my opening move. The man who meant to rein me in had just volunteered for a lesson in frontier-style problem-solving. I raised my shovel and flashed the grin that usually made sensible people nervous.
Ready to knock your lights out.
I had no sword, no armor, and absolutely no intention of pretending this was a respectable duel. Newman stared at my weapon and asked,
What is that, a shovel?
Bayern, the knight beneath him, watched me step into the yard with it. I explained that solid iron was enough for a proper beating, while Javier Strahan quietly questioned whether I had lost my mind. Javier called my shovel stance a joke, which was fair. Then I announced,
Now let the duel between Lloyd Frontera and Sir Newman begin.
Newman lunged first, and I met a trained knight with a tool designed for dirt. Beautiful plan, terrible optics. My shovel caught Newman's blade twice, and Bayern realized the problem.
Luck doesn't strike twice.
Newman swung again. Steel hit iron, but I had already learned the important part. His swordsmanship was cleaner, while my reach and leverage turned every block into a nasty counter. Newman pressed hard, so I showed him why a shovel was more than a bargain bin blade.
Besides, the shovel is a much more formidable weapon than one may think.
I blocked, jabbed, then drove the spade into the ground and rushed him with a handle. That finally cracked his confidence. Newman tried to retreat, but I stayed on him with the shovel's second trick. It could parry like a polearm, hook like a staff, and still smash with its weight.
The first weapon I prepared to destroy you, Newman, was this shovel.
Then the system pinged. Shoveling level 1 had awakened. The system offered another skill.
Would you like to learn the skill trenching?
I accepted because a shovel skill that reshaped terrain was not flavor text. It let me control footing before a stronger fighter could use his sword properly. Newman drew power anyway. He had stopped treating me like a civilian. Blue light burst from Newman's chest and wrapped around him. I watched the shape form and said,
So he is summoning Manhwa.
That raised the stakes fast. Newman gripped his sword with both hands and warned me.
Wise only getting started, hooligan.
I tightened my grip and waited. I, Lloyd Frontera, gave Javier Strahan, the swordsman beside me, 15 days to teach me the Strahan core technique.
Why do you look as if you're on your deathbed?
I asked when his face went blank.
Master Lloyd, how do you know about that?
Javier admitted the technique was unfinished. Javier apologized.
I have not taught you that. The technique is not yet finished.
That was the point. I rested my shovel on my shoulder and asked,
So you'll teach it to me if I help you perfect it?
Javier could only answer,
If that is possible, yes.
I laid out the flaw in Javier's mana heart, the blue mana core inside him.
Mana has to move through it, then bounce back out.
I said instead of forcing every bit through one core, I told him to condense a separate cluster nearby and loop the mana around the outside. That changed everything. Javier stared at me, then admitted,
It definitely seems plausible.
A moment later, he stepped forward and built 3 glowing mana circles around himself. The system flashed. Javier's approval rating increased by 5. I almost dropped my shovel.
I didn't know that much.
I protested while Javier looked completely convinced. The duel ended and I won easily. Then Newman's supporters piled onto the fallen knight while one furious man shouted,
I don't tolerate you sullying this knight's honor any longer.
Amid the scuffle, I noticed something beneath the table. Letters that changed the entire accusation. I opened the letters and found the real rot. Newman had exchanged them with the man who had cheated us in an estate deal, discussing Frontera's finances, my father's preferences, and forged documents.
Everything is discussed in those letters.
I said Peepadong had dragged the evidence out of its hiding place overnight. Tiny detective, big problem. I offered Newman a punishment that looked soft and worked like a collar.
Drop a vicious mouse on his head. If it hurts him, exile him. If not, make him a foot soldier.
Newman begged for mercy. Javier understood the mechanism immediately. The test kept Newman alive while leaving my authority over him permanent. Mercy required repentance. Newman had none.
I will have revenge on you and your lowlife son.
He snarled, so I answered.
It's nice to see you smile. It'll be for the last time.
When he demanded what I meant, Peepadong held up a sunflower seed. Newman finally understood. I had barely planned to hide until I found another mark when a door exploded inward.
I'm Lloyd Frontera,
I said because this trembling conman needed the name before the consequences landed.
Does that ring any bells?
The man went white while his black-cloaked bodyguard asked, "Shall I kill him?" The bodyguard seized his boss and blasted through the roof, so the escape became a full-on aerial retreat. Javier Esrahan, my white-haired swordsman, drew his blade and cut them off before they vanished into the night.
Leave him here and walk away quietly,
Javier said.
Refuse and I'll treat you as a co-conspirator.
Javier had followed my prediction perfectly, catching the pair at the back window exactly as planned. Towards, the conman tied to the estate fraud, sneered that Javier looked too young to hold a sword, then flooded the alley with dark magic. I recognized the real danger. This was Javier's first fight against a dark enchanter. Towards dropped a red gravitational spell straight at Javier and the courtyard buckled around him. Javier met it with steel, but the pressure shoved him low and kept tightening. That was the nasty part of weight magic. It did not need to hit cleanly.
So naive,
Tord said, already reaching for a finishing blow. Javier held his ground, shaking under a spell that should have pinned an ordinary high-level sword expert flat. Then his chest lit up. His triple-circle mana heart spread the load across 3 mana circuits, so the gravity could not choke one bottleneck and end the fight. He cut through the pressure, cleanly. Tord sweated hard enough to realize the contract was dead, then abandoned his own partner and shot into the air. Javier turned on the conman instead.
Do you know how serious fraud against a noble family is?
He asked. The threat worked. One crash later, Javier promised.
I'll cut off your legs and make you crawl to court.
I stepped between Javier and Tords before that sword turned a criminal case into an execution.
You're out of control,
I said.
If he goes to court, they'll have his head.
Javier froze and I saw the problem in his face. Was I showing pity for someone else? Apparently that shocked him more than the fight. Back at the table, Tords trembled in his ropes while Javier stood behind me like a loaded weapon.
There's no need to be so scared.
I told him.
I won't take you to court.
Relief hit him instantly, right before I named the price.
You'll hand over Baron's remaining assets, right?
I, Lloyd Frontera, had no interest in forgiving Tords for free. I slid over an employment contract with a paid salary, then revealed the repayment clause.
80% of your wages will be withheld.
At that rate, the bastard would need 520 years to clear his debt. Perfect. Javier Esrahan, my swordsman and the man who had just stopped Tords from escaping, finally understood the deal.
You think I would kill the guy who owes me a debt?
I made the interest clear too. Tords called it unjust, so I offered court instead. He signed immediately. With Tords secured in the wagon, I counted the recovered money and refused to sit on it.
30 soldiers are not enough.
The trouble was recruitment. My old hooligan reputation had poisoned the village, so even a well-paid notice looked doomed to fail. Then the applicants arrived. A few days later, Frontera's workers' line stretched out in front of me. Javier could barely believe it, but the Ondal floor had changed the calculation. The heating system kept a villager's child safe through the cold spell. That earned trust far faster than my reputation ever could. The Ondals had been a loss on paper, which was exactly why they worked. I had made villagers dependent on heat, then raised its price through travel costs.
Pretty soon, these mountains will be stripped bare.
Javier finally asked why I was building the mountain road. Now we were getting somewhere. Javier called me out for predicting the fuel shortage, and I pointed him down the Appian Way toward black coal. The road would carry coal to homes already hooked on Ondal heating, then sell it at a markup.
A very small discount.
I promised the locals. Javier hated how clean the trap was. Javier warned that older barons had tried mining there and lost shafts to weak bedrock. I had the better answer.
I have modern excavation technology.
The shield tunneling method would brace the tunnel as it advanced, solving the collapse problem instead of gambling against it. The blocked mine waited ahead. Inside the tunnel, something scraped through the dark. Long limbs dragged along the stone, followed by clusters of red eyes. Then the creatures emerged. I had come for black coal and found a nest of armored monsters guarding the mine instead. Damn, the job had just changed. I, Lloyd Frontera, clasped my hands and summoned a luxury Gangnam apartment building. The spell answered with a green beam that punched straight into the night sky. A skyscraper rose where it landed.
I summon you.
That towering vision was nice, but I was still hunched over blueprints, painstakingly tracing the real work by hand. The system pinged with Intermediate Design Level 1 and offered printing architectural drawing.
No thank you, this skill is the best.
My approval rating had bought me 639 RP, so I dumped it into planning and surveying upgrades. At the blocked mine, I needed a route through solid rock before the workers burned out digging blind. GPR scanning lit up and mapped 5 meters beneath the surface, which made it broken for tunneling because I could see a safe path before anyone swung a pick. Peepadong was sick, though.
Random summon game, start.
The summoning circle spat out Peepadong, a tiny pink creature who popped upright like this was perfectly normal. I tested the obvious possibilities first.
Can you grow bigger with sunflower seeds?
Peepadong nodded.
Can you show me your special skills?
Another nod. That innocent little face had just become my mining plan. A few weeks later, Peepadong had grown enormous and chewed through the earth at the front of the shield tunneling method. Chomping dirt broke the ground, accelerated dirt digestion kept the machine fed, and then came the useful gross part.
Javier, get ready.
Peepadong fired compacted steel dung behind her for Javier Esrahan to cut. Javier Esrahan sliced those launched chunks into uniform supports, while the men forged them into tunnel segments.
I am a knight, why am I slashing at a giant snake's turds?
Fair complaint.
Great, move forward.
The shield rolled deeper, and the air turned thin enough that my ventilation pipe stopped being an upgrade and became survival. I had promised myself I would stay on site, unlike the bosses I remembered from Korea, and GPR scanning soon paid me back with black coal.
We're almost there, men, keep going just a little longer.
With Peepadong, our digging ran 10 times faster. The coal was close, but I warned everyone.
Don't get complacent.
The wall rumbled. Solid rock had no business caving in, so I triggered GPR scanning and found a hole that had not been there before. Then it cracked open. Something black and armored crashed through the tunnel, throwing me and the workers aside. Javier Esrahan drew his sword. The mine had found teeth. The tunnel wall burst open and black-armored wild ants poured through it. A worker screamed as one lunged past her. I watched Peepadong blast one back, then the size of their bodies finally clicked.
Wait a minute, ants live in colonies.
This was a nest. Wild ants flooded the shaft, so I ordered the workers out before their panic became another casualty. Javier Esrahan carved open a path, but their numbers kept replacing every ant he dropped.
How many of them are there? 1,000.
I needed an answer fast. Javier cut down another attacker and snapped.
I'm not panicking, I'm thinking up a plan.
The pressure was getting ugly, and I could see he could not hold that swarm forever. Then the mine's black coal gave me the answer.
An ant nest, black coal, underground.
Fire. Javier wanted to run for the entrance.
We'll face them head on, let's go.
I called that idea ridiculous because charging a colony only traded one danger for a larger one. He trusted I had a reason, grabbed the torch, and we sprinted deeper into the mine. Back at Frontera, alarm raced through the workers when they heard wild ants had broken into the mine. Bayern began sealing the entrance to contain them. Then Javier and I blasted back into view with the swarm still behind us.
We're here.
Quiet containment was officially over. I swung the torch and yelled,
Stop talking to me, I'm really busy.
The ants were moving away from the flame, but they still had us boxed in. My GPR scanning showed the opening I needed.
There's gotta be a methane gas layer here.
One spark could weaponize the whole pocket. The scan finally marked the methane layer, a flammable gas pocket buried in the rock.
There it is.
I started digging and gave Javier the only job that mattered.
While I dig, you slice up the ants.
He turned into my moving wall, then something bigger screamed. Javier held the ring around me while I worked, but the swarm shook the mine hard enough to rattle the ground beneath us. Then its queen ant rose from the darkness.
Shit, the queen's absolutely enormous.
That was the real obstacle between us and the methane layer. The system scanned my old skills and found a perfect chain, absorbing mana, processing it, then amplifying it. That mattered because I could fuse the whole mana loop into Javier Asrahan's unfinished core technique instead of juggling 3 weaker tricks. I grinned.
Will you combine these skills into the Asrahan core technique?
Yes. Mana erupted around me as the Asrahan core technique formed at single circle level 5. I felt it immediately.
Mana amplified to 120%.
The system made the price clear too, draining 10 RP for each upgrade, but that was a bargain when every level strengthened the engine feeding my body. The core kept climbing, and my mana amplification hit 125% before the system offered another 15 RP upgrade. I took it.
No other choice right now. I needed to level up all the way.
Each purchase pushed the Asrahan core technique higher, until the skill finally broke through and upgraded. My Asrahan core technique became double circle level 1, doubling mana amplification to 200%, but it demanded 100 RP for the next level while I had only 7 left. Then 2 optional skills appeared.
Here we go.
I picked Asrahan Energizer because 10 minutes of mana recovery could keep me moving even through crushing fatigue. I drove the shovel through the earth while my oxygen bar began bleeding away. No room for finesse.
Please, I have to be there.
GPR scanning mapped a green underground route ahead of me, and I forced myself onward as the air reserve dropped into the red. The dirt gave way in violent bursts, and I kept shoveling until the oxygen warning nearly emptied. My scan showed the target only 3 meters away. Damn close. Then my strength finally buckled, and I crashed to my knees before I could reach it. My shovel clattered away as Asrahan Energizer reached its 10-minute limit. The extra mana had bought time, not immunity, and now the exhaustion hit all at once.
Latent power surge.
I grabbed the shovel again and threw myself into the ground, tearing through dirt with the last burst I had. GPR scanning showed the opening was only 30 centimeters away, yet my oxygen countdown gave me 20 seconds. I fell into the narrow shaft anyway.
I wanted to live the nice, sweet life of a country aristocrat.
The darkness swallowed me, and the ground began to crumble. I woke up buried in a nest of wild ant prey, staring at a huge green captive hanging above us while Javier Asrahan and I tested the fire against his bindings.
Hey, hold on there. You look useless, but you might be reckless enough to work.
The creature was an orc, alive too. That mattered because the ants had been storing him as food, not guarding a corpse. Back at Frontera, the rescued orc introduced himself as Arash and thanked me for saving him, while I explained that helping me would let him stand out from the other orcs.
Give me 120 acres to work the mines.
Arash had been the chief's second son, and the land was my price for turning one rescue into a working partnership. Arash called my demand impossible. Fair, still I laid out the trade.
You get 120 acres, and your warriors only defend them when orcs attack.
He had accidentally walked into a fire ant nest and gotten paralyzed, so the guy I saved was now standing between me and an entire tribe's muscle. Arash reminded me he had caught that creature with me, then explained how he had entered the ant nest and stumbled into a pile of prey with the queen waiting nearby.
So you saw it all?
I did. Once I proved I could understand his speech, Arash finally gave me the part that counted. He had heard I spent weekends fighting wild ants. That was the opening I needed. Arash had been caught by both of us, and when I asked whether the great warrior and his worker orcs could help, he understood the deal immediately.
And those 120 worker orcs?
The answer came with a roar.
You shall have them.
Now I had laborers with enough strength to make ordinary construction look embarrassing. 1 week later, I reached the village of the Sand and Steel tribe of wild orcs with Javier Asrahan, only to hear their chief reject my proposal before it even started.
Our tribe eats a lot of meat to build our muscles.
That was the real bottleneck. These orcs hunted constantly because they believed missed meat meant permanent muscle loss. The chief insisted that muscle loss meant lost strength, so every orc had to hunt again before their meat spoiled. I finally saw the exploit.
What if your meat could last multiple days without spoiling?
Food preservation was broken here for a simple reason. It converted hunting hours into dependable labor, and that was exactly what my estate needed. I leaned in with the answer while the chief tried to process it.
I can make meat last for days without spoiling.
That was all I needed to say. With Arash beside me and a whole tribe listening, Fronter's next workforce was suddenly within reach. Let's rewind to when I first reached the village. Arash came charging in, and the promised airborne giant lizard finally went sailing across the battlefield.
Father,
He roared, the landing hit hard enough to shake the ground, but the giant recovered and smashed straight back into him. Those two were enormous, so getting caught between their embrace would have turned me into paste. Still, I saw the real prize.
if I get 120 workers like that, our productivity will increase by hundreds of times.
Arash's return turned into a celebration, and his tribe chose the most orcish victory ritual imaginable: leg day. The orcs trained with logs that were practically trees, because they wanted muscle more than tools.
What are they doing with those huge objects?
I asked. Gold poured into their hands anyway, and that gave me the opening to pitch construction work. Their tribe could use my tools to get the treasure they wanted. Javier Asrahan, the white-haired swordsman I trusted with the sharp end of every bad plan, told me he belonged to a student society.
A student society, my lord.
I asked. He explained that their biggest job was a dangerously strong rock, and the more he described it, the more I realized we needed a human dynamite. Then I heard why Javier's old mission had gone so wrong. Namakin's wall had sealed a city full of refugees, and even a sword master could not break the barrier fast enough to save them.
I must save them even if it costs me my life.
He forced one circle of mana around the main mana heart, then crushed the remaining three together. Javier drove that compressed mana downward and named the move himself.
Mana Blast.
The spell mattered because collapsing separate circles into one overcharged core traded control for raw output, turning his mana reserve into a single breach charge. Fire punched through the barrier, then a purple rupture swallowed the impact. From that day on, Mana Blast became one of Javier's signature moves beside the Asrahan core technique. Back in front of me, I had a simpler question.
Tell me honestly, my lord, how do you know about things like this?
Javier's eyes narrowed. I had been talking like a liar who knew the story's spoilers. Javier tested the rock himself.
Relays.
His sword blast cracked the wall, but the recoil launched him backward. When the dust cleared, he had stripped to the waist and asked,
Did you anticipate this outcome as well?
I answered,
No, not at all, I'm sorry.
He still wanted the job. That was the important part. Javier Asrahan's approval of me climbed after I thanked him for taking the job, while my own rating jumped because I had helped repair his bond with an important backer.
I am a knight,
he reminded me. Then Peepadong started flying construction blocks over the site. The hauling had begun. The workers kept hauling blocks, but 2 weeks passed without a single knight showing up. Javier Asrahan watched the empty road and gave me the only two explanations that mattered.
Either they are lazy and taking their time, or something has happened to them.
We went looking. I tried to take charge, but Javier Asrahan stopped me cold.
Please allow me to complete my mission on my own.
He had asked how many men I wanted, then declared,
I am responsible for all my workers.
Fine. Once he agreed, we followed the trail into the rocks until a bloodied glove appeared at our feet. I recognized the glove immediately.
This is the special glove I had made for our men.
I said its straw insulation mattered because it proved our workers had reached this spot. Javier Asrahan felt mana flowing from the nearby Proja Gorge, and I spotted blood on the cliff. Our missing men were in real trouble. The blood trail turned my suspicion into panic.
Our men may already be dead.
I shouted because every minute we spent outside gave whoever hurt them more time to finish the job. Javier Asrahan froze at that. He had clearly just connected the same ugly possibility. I led Javier Strahan to the cave and finally recognized it as Lapellian's dungeon. That was bad news. In Night of Blood and Iron, this was where the book's supporting lead trained early, and I had no idea how he had reached a place that should have belonged to that story. My recognition hit a nerve, so Javier Strahan stepped ahead of me.
My lord, please follow behind me.
The instant his boot crossed the entrance, a magic booby trap detonated and blasted us backward. That confirmed the dungeon's first rule. It punished whoever entered first, which made leading the party a terrible deal. Javier Strahan survived the blast because Night of Blood and Iron had warned me that the first entrant absorbed the trap, while the book's protagonist came through untouched.
Try focusing on being more in tune with that sense.
I told him. His mana concentration found an unnatural cluster ahead. Another trap waited in the dark. Lloyd Frontera, that was me, and I led Javier deeper into the dungeon because the missing soldiers were still somewhere ahead.
This way.
He admitted I seemed to know exactly what was happening, then demanded an answer. I had none.
We must rescue the soldiers at once.
Farther inside, I saw a hooded mage checking the trap I had already survived.
Are they here to rescue the idiot who walked into the trap?
His captive assistant answered that they were surely dead. The mage shut him down.
Preparations are finally complete.
That was bad news. The hooded mage proved exactly why the soldiers mattered. He threw one onto a blood-red pentacle and announced,
A pentacle connected to the underworld.
His sickle needed 100 days and a young human to charge it.
It's perfect.
The sacrifice screamed. I was done waiting. Javier and I stepped in before that sickle could finish its job.
Don't you touch my stuff. I'll kill you, all right.
I snapped. The mage answered by unleashing a huge violet spell, but Javier caught the trick immediately.
But there were 3 traps.
The dungeon started coming down around us. The mage had filled the cave with sleeping gas strong enough to drop an elephant, planning 2 more sacrifices while we passed out. Cute plan. Javier used a Strahan energizer, a 10-minute stamina refill that made sleeping medicine useless, and the system pinged its name.
Energizer.
I kept digging. My shoveling level 1 turned me into a machine, so I tore through the earth while Javier held the line.
Javier, get in here.
I called from the tunnel. Once I found the weak wall, Javier drove a compressed blast through it.
Mana blast.
The whole barrier cracked open. The hooded mage watched his hideout rupture, then I climbed out of the rubble right in front of him.
Hi there, I bet you've never seen an engineer like this before, huh?
His smile disappeared.
What kind of monster is this?
He answered with another violet surge. Wrong answer. His reincarnation spell kept misfiring, but its byproduct still raised an airborne giant lizard with 3 snapping heads. That was the monster wave threatening the towers, and it had reached us first.
This one's going to be pretty tough, Javier.
Javier read the fight instantly.
Its weakness is its legs.
Javier Strahan answered the 3-headed airborne giant lizard with mana blast slash, driving compressed mana through all 3 necks in one rising cut. That mattered because the blast did not need a clean sword angle. It simply carried the cutting force straight through the target. The hooded mage gasped.
He used mana blast to cut that thing in half.
The giant lizard crashed down around Javier, but my swordsman stayed kneeling in the dust with his blade still drawn. The immediate monster threat was over. For 1 second, the cavern went quiet enough for the mage to understand exactly how badly his plan had failed. The hooded mage panicked and begged.
They're gonna kill me.
I stepped over and stopped him before he could turn fear into another excuse.
You set up construction work with this curse because you abducted my men. How are you going to make up for this?
His answer started with a dead family. Javier assured me.
Master Lloyd, the men are all doing well.
Good. The mage then admitted he had been researching how to bring his wife and child back from death, and I asked,
How is that even possible?
He described the family he had served in the royal castle. It was not ordinary grief. He told me his lord had been taken from him, then his wife and child had died while he was trying to protect them. I cut him off.
So you plan to bring your wife and kid back to you?
He nodded, but I had already heard the part that made his tragedy dangerous. I told the hooded mage.
You utterly crushed the happiness of others, people who were just like you.
His tears did not change the count.
You are a serial murderer.
I took his sorcery tools and warned him.
If you try to hurt anyone again, there will be no mercy.
Then I turned away. I recognized the hooded mage as Lapelian from Night of Blood and Iron. In that story, Javier Strahan forgave him, and Lapelian went on to murder hundreds before becoming Javier's recurring nightmare. So I walked away knowing the script. Behind me, Lapelian's eye opened, and purple magic gathered in his hand. Lapelian launched himself at us with a glowing spell circle, and I said,
I told you no mercy now, didn't I?
He had chosen the worst possible target. Javier Strahan already knew he would betray us, so one counter sent Lapelian flying across the cavern before that spell could land. Back when I was Suho Kim, an older foreman kept cursing me over nothing.
Your bow needs to be at 90 degrees, damn it.
I swallowed it and bowed anyway.
I'm sorry, sir, I'll be more careful.
I kept telling myself respect would come back someday. It never did. The next morning I greeted him politely, and he answered with another string of abuse.
You almost broke my eardrum, you little prick.
My temper finally had teeth. I tried to bury it.
Just ignore him, forget about him.
Then he insulted my parents, and that was the exact moment restraint stopped being useful. So I hit him hard. One punch became a beating before the other workers dragged me off, and I was already thinking,
oh, I'm screwed.
The foreman staggered away while I got shoved aside. Then I hauled a bundle of pipes and froze at something ahead of me. I finally had peace after the foreman ran, briefly. Looking back at violence and the easy excuses people gave for attackers, I decided villains deserved consequences that actually hurt.
You think we shouldn't sink to their level?
I had heard that argument before. I was done with it. By the time I became Lloyd Frontera, that thought had not softened. Beneath the reinforced rock overhead, I watched a hooded figure crawl beside armed men and lifted my shovel onto my shoulder.
Don't make me laugh. Villains deserve a punishment befitting a villain.
No soft landing, not for this one. I led the exhausted men through the forest with Javier Strahan, the white-haired swordsman at my side, and their bags were dragging them under.
You're going to pass out. Give me your bags.
They protested. I took every load anyway. A leader who could carry the weight was worth more than a speech. With every pack strapped onto my back, I cut off the arguing.
If I hear another word, no one is getting a bonus. Now let's go.
The rescued soldiers could not tell whether I was being cruel or considerate. That uncertainty worked for me. Their trust was already becoming a resource. The system pinged that my stunt had moved the rescued soldiers, then tried selling me on a rewarding experience.
If the reward isn't money, I'm not interested.
Ahead, Sikbingo was a stone ice storehouse, but Arash warned the meat would spoil without ice. I smiled.
This place isn't finished.
Arash still did not understand why I had asked about ice, so I gave him the only useful answer.
If we don't have any, we can just make some.
He blinked and asked,
how?
I smiled.
Somehow.
The rescued orc had started wondering whether I had conned him about the queen ant, which was fair. Annoying, but fair. Arash muttered that he might be an idiot, then asked if I needed help.
I'll work for triple pay, okay?
Before I could enjoy that victory, Javier asked,
what should we do?
I turned toward him. The ice was not the point. I needed a plan that made Sikbingo useful before another problem found us. I asked Javier what successful people had in common. He stared at me like the question itself had committed a crime.
I can't tell that because of this.
Fine, I answered it myself. People who succeed start things and figure them out afterward.
Now that is innovation.
I drove my fist into my palm. The important part was momentum. Javier cut through my speech immediately.
Those people are 100 times more likely to fail than succeed.
Rude, accurate. That night, I sat beneath the moon and settled on the first step.
Let's make a giant ice cube mold.
Peepadong and the others had water magic, so I watched them freeze water into solid ice while I studied the trick. The answer was hiding in the spell itself. Water magic gathered mana with water-like properties, then reshaped it into ice. I copied the logic and formed a fireball instead. That mattered because I was no longer borrowing someone else's spell. I was learning the rule underneath it. Padong protested.
Hey, this view over here.
I named the method the Asrahan core technique and pushed my hand into the water.
I will absorb only the water mana and leave behind the coal mana.
The flow recoiled through my arm, painful. Then Javier saw what I was attempting and said,
How irresponsible, how reckless.
That was basically encouragement from him. The mana kept sparkling around my arm while I forced the technique to hold. Javier folded his arms and admitted,
I guess there's no stopping him.
Then the system pinged. I had developed a new application for the Asrahan core technique, raising it to level 2. A few days later, the workers returned to a very different Siak Bingo. A massive block of ice now stood inside Siak Bingo, and Arash could barely process it.
You made ice, oink.
I told everyone.
No need to put insulation in there anymore.
The orcs roared over the result, while Javier calmly called it
the mind of an entrepreneur.
For once, he was right. At the Sand and Steel Tribes camp, Lloyd Frontera, that was me, accepted the payoff for our contract, 120 orc workers. Akash, the tribe's leader, made the terms crystal clear.
When we are grateful, we show it.
Then he declared my family their blood brothers and sealed it with a vow. Akash rallied the entire tribe around me.
The Fronteras are our friends.
That mattered because their loyalty was now public, not just a private deal I could lose to one bad conversation. The system confirmed the tribe had opened up. Their approval raised my RP by 100, and my total hit 611. Back in town after the long trip, I marched in with Javier Asrahan and 120 terrifyingly muscular orcs. The townspeople panicked on sight. Fair. Even my father froze, so I decided the only move was to get ahead of the fear.
I should issue an announcement to try and quell their fears.
My rescue of the soldiers and defeat of the Dark Sorcerer had spread across the land, earning 300 bonus RP and bringing me to 911. Nice, but the Sorcerer's tools were the real prize, Javier asked.
Is there anything of monetary value?
I found something in the books and bolted for the mine. At the mine, I found Tords, the conman who had been trapped under a 520-year work contract. Then I revealed the clause was a joke, brutal setup, excellent release.
You don't have to worry anymore.
The book held a spell that could turn a corpse into a ghoul under my control, and I showed him the diagram. Tords finally understood.
That means you can work the whole 520 years.
I was thrilled by the loophole. He was not.
Smile.
Tears followed, which honestly answered the mood. As I cheered him on from the tunnel, the system announced that the ruler of the underworld wanted to offer me a position. The system confirmed it was true, and I headed for a talk with my father. A maid stopped me at the reception room.
The Baron has some guests.
When she named Munelender Shiloh and Munelender Metaloaf, I understood exactly why they had come. My face did the rest. Munelender Metaloaf and Munelender Shiloh offered my father a deal. Repay 10% of the principal, then hand over the mine rights. That was not mercy. It was a foreclosure with a smile. I knocked, walked in, and greeted them sweetly.
If you're thinking about threatening us again, you can buzz off.
I, Lloyd Frontera, smiled at Munelender Metaloaf and Munelender Shiloh while they tried to talk over me.
May I be so bold as to suggest an offer of my own?
I asked, Metaloaf objected, and I cut straight through it.
So you two can spit out crappy offers, but I can't.
Arash stepped in behind me.
To anger my Frontera brother.
Arash made the price of bothering Frontera painfully clear.
Anyone who causes trouble for the Fronteras will be destroyed with the full force of the Sand and Steel tribe.
The creditors panicked while I laughed off the act.
No, just he has a loud voice.
Then I leaned closer.
If you hurt Frontera's feelings, I will tear you to pieces.
With the debt cancellation settled, I handed over the Ondal floor contract and made its terms simple.
The Ondal construction business is gradually expanding, and the mining of coal is going smoothly.
That meant I could clear the debts. One problem remained.
These guys eat 10 times more than a normal human.
Feeding 120 orcs could devour every gain. The answer was sitting right in front of me. Orcs only worked when their bellies were full, but they could swing a pick for 24 hours without stopping. That made them absurdly efficient miners.
The key was to pay them.
I realized, yet wages alone would never keep that workforce fed, so I needed a revenue stream built around their labor. I needed money to bring in more orcs, and my advisor warned that raising taxes would crush people who were already scraping by. Fair.
Who would be willing to work hard if the tax all going to be taken away?
So I proposed the only version that worked.
We need to have the people make lots of money.
My target was the forgotten northern lands. I pointed at the wetlands and laid out the stakes.
We'll transform the wetlands into farmland, then we give that land to the people.
If farmers could actually profit there, the estate could collect taxes without bleeding them dry. The land had driven people away for centuries, and water covered far too much of it. I started mapping channels anyway.
No choice, time for the old-fashioned way.
My first water tests failed. One spot sat too high, the next sat too low, and neither route drained properly. I kept shaping the channels by hand until 21 days had passed. My father, Arcos Frontera, heard I had barely rested or eaten.
No,
he answered when asked whether I should be stopped. I carried another bucket, still working. I was soaked, exhausted, and still refusing to quit. Javier Srahan watched me work and gave the one verdict I cared about.
A wise decision, my lord. The current master is the type of person to never leave.
The system flashed blue. Baron Frontera's approval had risen, and I gained 20 RP. My balance hit 931 while I kept carving the wetland into farmland. Rain finally poured through the channels, and I threw both fists at the moon.
It's draining, the water's draining away.
With the wetland runoff moving, I pictured tax money following the same path straight into Frontera. Then my legs gave out. The system had already noticed the work. The system gave my effort a major boost and unlocked architectural design, a special design skill. Its simulation mode used survey data to build a virtual model of the terrain, which meant I could test drainage before digging myself into another disaster.
Only knowledge you earn yourself is enhanced with skills.
So my wish had been doing more than I thought. All I had wished for was enough money to live without worrying about it, but the system called that wish something that crossed time and space. Before I could untangle that nonsense, Padang and Bangle popped into view.
Would you like to meet a new friend?
At sunrise, the Maritz Wetlands Reclamation Project demanded workers who could dig. Padang and Bangle happily accepted the job, while I decided to spend 50 RP on the random summon game.
I don't need any special skills.
That was me tempting fate, obviously. The blue screen promised 4 summons per day, and I hit start. Something green began forming in front of me. The summon burst out in green light and immediately smacked me in the face. Then it bounced around with Padang and Bangle, laughing like this was all perfectly normal. I finally got a look at the round yellow creature.
A hippo, no wait, a water-guzzling hippo.
Hamang, the yellow water-guzzling hippo summon, spat out a soaked sheet of paper after choking down a pile of debris.
Yes, I'm used to it by now.
The supposed instruction manual was blank. When I checked whether sunflower seeds could make Hamang bigger, the answer was no. Damn, I had pulled a dud. By morning, the random summon game shut me down cold.
The summons game can only be played once a day.
Padang and Bangle protested when I called Hamang useless, but I needed something bigger for the wetland work. Fine.
Hamang, what is your skill? If it's dehumidifying, you can go in my closet.
The system revealed Hamang's skill.
One shot level 1.
It could not drink a single mouthful because that would have been mid. It could drink as much water as its stomach could hold. That was broken for reclamation work. Hamang leaned over the shore and started slurping the wetland dry while I watched, suddenly very interested. I blinked at Hamang and asked,
Am I imagining it, or does he look bigger?
The yellow summon kept gulping the remaining water until his body ballooned beyond absurd. Then he plunged forward and whipped the whole pool into a savage whirlpool. Hamang just laughed. Hamang's oversized body left the reclaimed ground nearly dry in a blink, and I shouted,
I can drink this much that quickly.
The system answered my suspicion with the most backhanded explanation imaginable.
Maybe you got lucky and summoned a special skill.
Even my summons looked smug. The system refused to give me a straight answer, so I let Hammond keep drinking and told him.
Drink to your heart's content.
Tomorrow mattered more. I had already laid out the vertical drainage system, and once that network started pulling water downward, the Maritz Wetlands Reclamation Project could finally move from one drained patch to a functioning field. I drove the workers through the next section, blasting drainage holes and stacking sandbags to stop deeper water from flooding back into our work. Hammond handled the water with one-shot level 1 while we built the levees behind him. That combination was broken for reclamation because every gulp created dry ground my crews could immediately lock in. After we finished a section, I called,
Bonus party, all right, let's go.
Then Javier Strahan arrived with an inconvenient question about what happened after I made farmland fair. I handed him seeds and said,
Take these seeds, plant them all over there, and water them.
His answer was pure Javier.
I am a knight, my lord, why would I?
Javier took the assignment anyway, grumbling.
He has really turned these wetlands into farmland.
The workers could see it too. Their system reward appeared as a miracle bonus, and I received 450 RP for the reclamation. The land was changing. More importantly, the people now had proof that my ridiculous plan actually worked. Javier watered the new shoots while I looked over the field and said,
Now all we need to do is build a water wheel and well.
A water wheel was the next real test because reclaimed ground without controlled irrigation simply became a swamp again. Then I heard horses approaching. My engineers should have been here about then. The riders were not my engineers. Viscount Lashin, the noble claiming the North Maritz wetlands, rode straight in and demanded,
Who is in charge of this project?
I stepped forward before Javier could start something. Lashin's warning landed clean.
Did you not know that land belongs to Viscount Lashin? Leave this place at once.
I learned the old lord had found a viciously smart reclamation incentive. Residents received unrestricted land for 3 years, but they had to return triple the profit afterward. Their last 2 years became a frantic cultivation sprint, while the owners watched their land value climb. Damn, the old man was jealous enough to clutch his chest. A few days later, I, Lloyd Frontera, woke with a splitting headache beside Javier Strahan, the swordsman who had been running himself ragged organizing the sections and water distribution.
Hey Javier, get up, I'm pretty sure I'm dying.
He stared back at me, equally wrecked.
Why do you look so out of it?
Javier pressed a hand to his head and admitted,
This has never happened before, this headache is quite severe.
Mine throbbed too, then a thought cut through the pain.
Wait.
I grabbed my hair because the impossible answer was starting to form.
It can't be.
The trouble reached every corner of the village. Emily, maid of the Baron's estate, said her son had woken with a headache. Alep, a village farmer, could barely move, and Michael reported the cows had stopped drinking water. I saw the pattern immediately.
It's affecting everyone in the village. The water must be causing this.
The answer dragged me back to the novel I had read before coming here, Night of Blood and Iron. I had researched every corner of the Lashin region while trying to find a route home, and its strange source of income had always been a dying mystery. Now I saw Viscount Lashin again.
Lashin, that motherfucker.
Viscount Lashin sat across from me and made his price plain.
Give us half of the reclaimed Maritz wetlands.
I called it what it was.
You must know this is blackmail.
He smiled and agreed, then dared me to take it to court. Fine. I slammed the table.
I will formally take you to court before the king.
Lashin calmly explained why my righteous lawsuit was a trap.
A verdict will take at least 2 years, and the king is busy.
That delay would let the wetlands drain and lose value while I waited. My temper snapped when he invoked his son and the blood his people had shed. I refused.
I will not give a single inch.
After Lashin moved to leave, I stopped him.
Sir, I have something to tell you. I would like to discuss countermeasures.
His guard mistook that for an insult and lunged at me, which was a spectacularly stupid read. Lashin drew steel instead.
You have insulted the honor of the knight twice. Name of our Frontera knight, I challenge you to a duel.
I, Lloyd Frontera, had already won the duel, but the fool who disrespected Baron Frontera was still getting the full shovel treatment.
Enough, please stop hitting me.
He begged. I finally caught my breath and called it satisfying. Then I raised the shovel again. Javier Strahan looked horrified. Back in his office, I learned Viscount Lashin's bruised lackey had expected punishment for failing. Instead, Lashin smiled.
No, good works, you did very well.
His play was filthy but obvious: frame me for assault, drag us into court, and let the delays bleed Frontera dry. He thought he had me cornered. I rallied Frontera's people before the poisoned water could break their nerve.
We will blow them out of the water by our own means.
A reservoir gave us clean water immediately, and Hamming activated one-shot level 3 to haul it from upstream before it turned foul. Useful stopgap, not a real cure. That reservoir only bought time, so I laid out the real answer: a water supply system fed from Lake Capua in the eastern mountains. Javier Strahan saw the insane distance first.
The labor alone would be enormous.
Exactly, I would charge Lashin a construction fee so vicious it returned 100 times my investment. Months passed, and he was still sweating. When I arrived at Viscount Lashin's estate, his steward announced that Baron Frontera's eldest son wanted an audience. Lashin tried to dismiss me. I settled into his chair anyway.
Goodness, my dear Viscount, you are looking awfully well.
His face tightened when I said,
We've come here to help you with your problems.
I let the silence sit, then offered the only bait he could not ignore.
Perhaps I could help save that crumbling dye workshop of yours.
Viscount Lashin froze. He had figured it out.
You're the one that ruined my dye workshop.
Now the man who wanted me buried needed my engineering. I told Viscount Lashin exactly why his water problem had become expensive.
We had to bring in water all the way from Lake Capua.
We dug the route, laid pipes, buried them, and fought through every ugly complication that came with it. He slammed the table.
What did you do to my dye workshop?
I was getting there. The route crossed an enormous valley, so I had no choice but to build a Roman-style aqueduct. Javier blasted limestone for material, but loose stone carpeted the valley floor and exposed more limestone bedrock beneath it. Viscount Lashin finally snapped.
What does any of this have to do with my dye workshop?
Everything. I finally spelled out the trap for Viscount Lashin.
The water from that valley flows down to your workshop, and the lime in it ruined every cloth you dyed.
He slammed the table and shouted,
I will sue you at the royal court.
I smiled.
Please do, it will take at least 2 years. Who will remember your goods by then?
With Lashin's workshop already bleeding money, I rose from my seat and said,
I have answered your questions. I'll be taking my leave.
He raged behind me about his royal court friends and promised to make me pay. Outside, Javier Strahan, my white-haired swordsman, cut through it.
The Viscount will fight us in court until the bitter end.
Javier warned me that Lashin's capital connections would make a legal battle expensive. Fair point.
Just you wait,
he said, but I had already seen the better wager.
Let's see who has more to lose.
1 month later, the man who called me a scoundrel was on his knees, begging me to save his dye workshop. Lashin admitted defeat because his own man had confessed to intentional misconduct.
I am deeply sorry.
He begged. I let him sweat.
Is your pride worth even 1/10 of a gold piece?
That question mattered because pride could not keep a workshop alive. Then I made my real demand.
I just want a simple signature.
I laid out a water supply contract between Frontera and Lashin's territory.
Sign this and we can supply your workshop within a week.
Lashin reached for it, then balked at the price. I leaned in.
The person who taught me water is not free was you.
His face collapsed. Beautiful. The contract started paying Frontera a huge monthly sum, enough to cover interest and leave money over. I applauded Lashin's generosity while Javier stood there in silence. The actual mechanic was vicious. I had locked the deal without an end date, turning his water dependence into permanent rent. He had started the fight. Now he looked doomed. I pictured Lashin chained to that contract even after death, his bloodline still paying for water. A fine would have been nothing. Then an estate man arrived with news that flipped my attention. Count Cremo wanted to buy the battered treasure from the sand and steel tribe of wild orcs for a handsome price. My smile vanished. The offer made no sense, I said.
A big shot like him could buy brand new pieces. Why this old treasure?
The answer was that Count Cremo wanted a statue built. In Cremo City, the commerce hub, the Count stood alone by the window. Beneath the moonlit water, something surfaced, and his eyes snapped toward it. The airborne giant lizard finally came down hard, and I drove myself through the clash with enough force to wreck the ground beneath us. Then everything went black. Javier Esrahan, my white-haired swordsman, found me sprawled out cold and asked, "Oh." By the time I woke up, the real work had continued. Workers were already building the waterway safely. Javier Esrahan handed me Viscount Lashen's message, and I gave the man credit where it was due.
Oh, good work.
The Viscount had targeted me because Frontera's water payments were bleeding him dry, but he had picked a terrible way to retaliate. Javier warned.
He thinks about everything in advance.
That was useful intelligence, even if it sounded ominous. I had to ask the practical question.
I've got you beside me, so what other precautions do I need to take?
Javier Esrahan told me to think about surviving without help, then hit me with the ugly truth. I had made it this far by leaning on a knight who was absurdly dependable. Damn, he was right. That landed awkwardly.
This is awkward, why don't you say something?
I joked while Javier Esrahan admitted.
I hate myself for thinking that.
Still, he called me a decent man. The system answered with blue notices. Javier's long-term resentment was finally easing. My approval rating rose by 15, and our relationship reward pushed my RP to 1,675. With the waterway work secured, I stopped brooding and chose the next money trail.
Then let's go to Cremo.
I told Javier Esrahan. Count Cremo had a city full of commerce and a buyer's appetite, which made the destination worth the ride. My plan was beautifully simple.
To earn big bucks.
On the road to Cremo City, I apparently nodded off behind Javier Esrahan and woke up convinced I had been hit.
You hit me just now, didn't you?
I demanded.
No, sir.
Javier answered. I pressed him, and he calmly insisted I had dreamed it. Incredible. My own swordsman had become fluent in nonsense. I got off the horse and made a perfectly reasonable request.
Teach me how to ride a horse.
Javier Esrahan refused on the spot.
I'm a knight, not a horse-riding instructor.
Fair enough, then our meanings started crossing wires. My thanks sounded like another command to him, while his irritation somehow read like praise. What was wrong with our minds? A blue system notice cut through the bickering. Rumors of my waterway were spreading across the continent. That mattered because reputation was construction currency. Once people believed I could finish a water project, bigger jobs became easier to win before I even pitched them. My engineer reputation rose, my name entered history, and the system handed me 600 bonus RP.
Whoa, jackpot.
Winter stretched our ride to Cremo City into a midwinter slog, but Count Cremo received Javier Esrahan and me warmly.
I heard you were a talented builder, so I expected a rough-looking man.
Then he looked straight at me and laughed.
You seem like the noblest of all nobles.
Count Cremo immediately asked whether I was engaged, then offered his daughter before I could recover.
If not, then consider my daughter.
Javier got called a servant for interrupting, and my face betrayed me. The Count decided he had caused a grave offense. He had no idea. Count Cremo kept blaming my servant face, which was unfair but not entirely inaccurate. More importantly, I recognized him from Knight of Blood and Iron. In that story, Javier Esrahan became a fugitive after killing Monolender Shiloh and Monolender Metaloaf, yet Cremo saw his character and helped him anyway. I heard why Cremo City was collapsing. A Gigatitan had appeared off the port, and although it never attacked, no navy could touch it underwater. I remembered the novel's abrupt ending.
I thought Javier would do something to help.
The problem was bigger than the book had bothered to finish. Cremo's research had found the Gigatitan's weakness, mermaids, the strongest warriors of the sea.
It fears anything that resembles a mermaid.
His answer was a giant mermaid statue offshore. The concept was solid psychological warfare, but he had already given up because planting one in the sea looked impossible. Raising the seabed would choke the shipping channel, so Cremo could not just pile up the ocean floor. He still wanted to sell his jewels, though.
Please do not just take a loss.
Fine.
I will sell them for the highest price possible and build your statue without disturbing the water level.
I had the answer, a friction pile and box caissons. The pile would transfer the statue's load through the soft seabed, while the caisson gave us a controlled underwater foundation, so we never needed to raise the whole sea.
Whoa.
Then the depth scan found bedrock much farther down, and seawater punished my optimism. Soaked to the bone, I caught Javier smiling at my suffering.
It is the first time that watching someone suffer has made me so happy.
I handed him the measurements and asked about the contract. He called it magic, fair enough.
The magic of cement.
Roman-style cement could make the impossible foundation real. I had barely reached the dock when a young noblewoman called after me.
Are you Master Lloyd Frontera?
She held out a heart-sealed letter and admitted,
I have something I want to give you.
My brain stalled.
Me.
Whoever she was, this had gotten weird fast. Christine, Count Cremo's daughter, introduced herself and explained.
I saw you walking through the mansion courtyard yesterday.
Then she shoved the letter toward me and begged.
Please accept this.
I had expected business, not a confession with witnesses.
Well, I was sort of expecting this, but it's fine.
I took Christine's letter, and she sprinted away celebrating like I had just accepted a royal engagement. Javier Strahan watched the whole disaster in silence.
Let us proceed.
Fair, then I snapped at him.
When you act like nothing just happened, it really annoys me.
Javier had clearly noticed something I had missed. Javier looked me dead in the face and asked,
Have you never loved a life before?
That question hit harder than it deserved to.
I don't really know what to say.
The system answered for me with a blue notification. Javier sincerely wished me the best. His expression said the opposite. Count Cremo found me afterward and stared at my face like it had survived a siege. I waved it off.
Oh, please forgive me, Count. I was focused on my work.
He changed subjects immediately, praising my Roman-style cement.
The advantages of Roman cement are obvious.
The problem was cruelly simple. Its recipe needed volcanic ash. Roman-style cement was the foundation that could keep Count Cremo's sea project standing, but volcanic ash was nowhere nearby.
Time for Plan B. I'll give up on Roman cement and make Portland cement.
That was the engineering move. Portland cement gave me a formula I could iterate with local materials, so every failed sample still narrowed the answer. I kept muttering through mixed ratios while Padang, Bangle, and Haming climbed all over me demanding attention.
I'll add on 4 more combinations for now.
They answered with non-stop squeaks and headbutts.
I'm busy, go on a walk without me.
The summons did not respect research deadlines, naturally. A white dog sat beside a bone, cheerful and completely unaware of the mood it had triggered. One look at it dragged me into a funeral vision, flowers, a framed portrait, and a tiny body laid beneath them. I broke down over that memory. No cement formula mattered for a second. This one hurt. The last member of my family had died, and I could only stare at a dog who looked painfully like the one I had lost.
I'm sorry.
I should have brushed him one more time, played with him one more time. Instead, Lloyd Frontera bowed beside Padang, Bangle, and Haming, then led them into the night.
I'm such an awful person.
Padang, Bangle, and Haming stared back like I had just confessed to tax fraud, so I asked them to behave until I found a way to make up for my regrets.
Thank you, this is all thanks to you.
The 3 tiny summons answered with pure affection. That hit harder than it had any right to. The system rang out with a stack of relationship rewards, naming me a member of the gang and unlocking an upgrade for the fantastical creatures. I had enough RP to recycle a new skill, but their upgrade mattered more.
No matter what the skill is, I'm sure I can find a use for it.
Then the system made me choose one creature.
Bangle.
The pink summon lit up, hit level 3, and gained volcanic blast level 1. That was the important part. A creature who could produce volcanic material turned my Portland cement problem from a scavenger hunt into a renewable resource. Bangle fired skyward, and the blast shook the ground.
That's awesome.
At Cremo City, a violent explosion tore into the snowy mountains outside the city of commerce. The streets trembled. Count Cremo himself rushed to the window, and a dark column of smoke climbed into the sky. So much for quietly testing a new skill. A cracked giant egg rolled through the snow, with Bangle's pink body bursting out of it, and Javier Strahan arrived beside me just as I spotted the green system markers in the smoke.
That's ash.
I laughed. Javier looked at the eruption, then at me.
You're ugly.
Fair, the volcanic ash was still there.
The key to construction is speed. Let's begin.
I put Bengal at the center of Cremo City's plan, starting with 4 giant towers layered in moss and packed with dirt to filter the volcanic ash. Once the structure was ready, I activated Volcanic Blast. Bengal inflated into a living siege shell, and the whole square braced for impact.
One more time, it's gonna blow.
The explosion made Count Cremo realize I was not ordinary, but I had already moved to the useful part. Bengal's enormous body became the perfect place to pack the ingredients for cement.
Make a caisson to pour the cement into.
The massive structure dropped into the sea with a splash. Hemming switched one shot to hauling duty and sucked every drop out of the caisson, leaving the bottom exposed so my crew could drive the friction posts into solid seabed. That was the whole point. I called.
Stage 3.
Javier asked.
When will we receive the next post?
I answered.
Wait a moment, they're working hard to deliver them.
Javier looked at me like I had lost my mind, so I told him.
I was just thinking about how you complain you've been overworked.
He snapped.
You didn't even say that.
Fair, I made him hammer anyway.
If you don't hammer the posts in, then I won't earn any money. Then we can clear our debts,
I said,
and finish the regular caisson work.
Once the Roman-style cement cured, I broke apart the caisson and let its platform float free. The crowd immediately questioned whether my foundation could carry an entire estate. Count Cremo gave me the only offer that mattered.
If you put a mermaid statue there, it will look like it's floating.
Then he added,
If you do succeed, we'll waive the construction fees.
I accepted the pressure, though the water was cold enough to make that choice feel less heroic halfway through. Soon ships circled the completed sea platform beneath a towering mermaid statue, and the whole place turned into a glittering reception. I tugged at my collar and muttered,
Ugh, this is so uncomfortable.
Javier caught me adjusting the formal clothes and asked,
How did you put on these clothes?
I said,
I remember wearing them at events from my time.
Then the guests noticed me.
This is the young man who made that estate platform.
Great, the compliments poured in while Javier stared at me with an expression that could have stripped paint. Count Cremo laughed at my face while Javier wondered why his combination attack kept following me around. The banquet chatter froze when the sea began to bubble beyond the lights. One wave rose higher than the rest, then it burst open, and something enormous smashed up through the water. The mermaid statue suddenly looked a lot less decorative when the real thing surfaced near the ships. I watched a huge armored body rise from the water, its glowing eyes locked on the celebration. A monster followed beneath it, all horns and jagged shell. The sea had delivered its natural enemy. There was only one target now. The giant lizard cut through the water toward the platform, and the mermaid answered with a single thought.
I'm going to kill it.
Then the promised airborne giant lizard finally came flying over the battlefield, launched straight up in a violent rush of water. The creature twisted in midair. Everyone below went silent. Count Cremo's celebration drifted along under the moon while I, Lloyd Frontera, watched Javier Strahan, Frontera's strongest swordsman, go unnaturally still with his wineglass in hand.
Turn,
Javier said. The whole mood changed. His fingers tightened around the glass as he faced the open sea. A joke about Javier looking like a statue died immediately.
I think something is coming this way,
Javier said, and a huge shape knifed through the water below us.
Like what?
I asked. Javier only measured the wake with his eyes.
I don't know exactly, but it's extraordinarily swift.
Javier judged the thing at nearly twice our ship's size, which turned my stomach before I even saw its body.
Holy crap,
I muttered as the Gigatitan surged beneath the water. Sir Genovan cut through the party chatter. We must evacuate everyone. This was no longer a fancy demonstration. Sir Genovan, Count Cremo's sharp-eyed retainer, admitted he sensed nothing strange, but I trusted Javier's read over everybody else's comfort.
The Gigatitan has never come this close in recent years,
Count Cremo insisted. Then the giant mermaid statue rose beside us, and even I had to concede there was a reason now. Sir Genovan's nerves finally caught up with reality, and the order came down fast. Raise the anchors, get the boats away from the statue. The Gigatitan was already churning toward us while sailors fought the chains.
This is taking too long.
Javier said, so what did I do?
Javier, take care of the anchor.
Javier plunged straight into the sea, and I called Pipadong because brute force was finally the correct answer. Pipadong crunched a red sunflower seed and ballooned against the statue's base. Broken little mechanic that summoned turned one anchor point into a movable battering ram. Below us, Javier cut the chain with
Monoblast chop.
Pipadong snapped the line loose, but freeing the ships only made the current throw them harder across the waves. Javier severed another anchor connection and caught the real problem.
It sped up.
The Gigatitan had stopped testing the water and started hunting. Spread out, scatter yourselves, came the order. Then the promised airborne giant lizard came crashing through the spray, roaring as it smashed into the ship's path and sent the guests flying. Pipadong and the statue slammed down after it. Javier rode the recoil skyward, but the chaos caught him too. I launched up and grabbed him before the sea could. The airborne giant lizard I had teased was already spinning over the waterfront, and its landing blasted debris and people into the water. I reached for Javier Strahan as he went under, but the current tore us apart.
Help me.
Javier cried. Above us, the creature kept crashing through the city. Javier surfaced beside Hamang, my yellow water-guzzling summon, while the Gigatitan's splash threatened to pull everyone under.
Hamang.
I, Lloyd Frontera, called.
One shot.
Hamang answered, swallowing the surge in one pull and leaving trapped civilians room to breathe. That was busted because it turned a drowning hazard into empty space before anybody needed a rescue boat. Javier Strahan demanded,
Where are you going? The Gigatitan is the other way.
I pointed toward the fleeing crowd and said,
That's why we have to run this way, you fool.
He snapped.
You want to fight that monster? Have you lost all your bananas?
The water was still full of people. That decided it. Rescue came first, I yelled.
Hurry, Hamang, the sea is dangerously cold.
And dragged survivors toward the boat while the Gigatitan stomped through the streets.
Get the people out of the water as soon as you can.
I ordered. Javier Strahan watched the panic spread, then asked,
Are you ignoring everyone still in danger?
I answered Javier Strahan with the ugly truth.
We came here to make money. We didn't come here to fight some sea monster and keep the peace.
I looked at the city's soldiers and artillery, then added,
They'll be just fine on their own.
Javier went silent, remembering why I had never abandoned a project once people depended on it. That silence cost me. The system showed Javier Strahan's approval rating falling 5 points, then raised my approval rating by 1 while leaving me at 1,901 RP. Javier drew his sword.
I could never do that.
When I protested,
Hey, stop trying to be righteous and get your ass back here.
He launched himself toward the fight. Javier Strahan hit the water and called,
Mana blast.
His compressed mana did more than make a splash. It drove him across the waves like a launch rail, which was broken because the sea itself became his speed boost. The towers were still standing, and their cannons answered with a full barrage at the Gigatitan. The barrage struck the Gigatitan head-on, but it did not even flinch. Damn. I heard terrified cries as its eyes burned bright, its roar rolled across the city, and its huge body came down hard enough to rip the streets apart. The giant lizard I had teased was already sprawled across the street, but the Gigatitan rose over it and made its target painfully clear.
The mermaids must die.
It roared as its feet crushed through the waterfront. People scattered.
Move.
I shouted because this had stopped being a monster hunt and become a massacre. Javier Strahan launched himself through the smoke with Mana Blast, his compressed mana attack, and drove a blazing slash straight at the Gigatitan. The hit landed, then the monster just shrugged it off.
My Mana Blast slice bounced off.
Javier snapped. That was the problem. Raw power was reaching it, but not penetrating it. The Gigatitan answered with claws, teeth, and a tail big enough to flatten buildings, forcing Javier into a brutal exchange he could barely keep ahead of. He cut through the first rush and threw himself clear of the next tail strike.
Damn it.
I heard him grunt. One clean hit would have ended him. Javier tried to ride the monster's momentum, but the Gigatitan caught him anyway and hammered him through the street. He came up bloodied, still gripping his sword.
This is enough.
He said. I knew that look. Javier had decided a city was worth spending every last scrap of mana on. I, Lloyd Frontera, fled over the water on a tiny raft while the fighting raged behind me.
I know it may never rest as a monster, and I may even die here.
I admitted, still, destroying it near people would bury the city under the fallout.
I have to pull it away first.
The Gigatitan followed my raft across open water, and I clenched my teeth as the city finally fell behind us.
If I run away like this, the city will be destroyed, and I'll leave it to be destroyed.
I told myself, then I called for Bengal.
Their construction fee payments will be delayed.
Bengal took that insult personally and launched Volcanic Blast Level 1, a volcanic material attack, right at the Gigatitan. Javier used the opening to slash at its weak spot.
It's still an animal after all.
I realized that mattered. Even a sea monster had instincts, and pain could steer it exactly where I needed. The Gigatitan whipped its tail toward Javier, so I finally brought out Hamming.
Hamming's hammer.
I yelled. Hamming became the perfect counterweight. A giant water-filled body dropped with enough mass to smash the monster's exposed weak point. The impact cracked across its shell. Now we had its attention. The airborne giant lizard finally crashed into the waterfront, and the impact shook the whole fight apart. Peepadong spun through the air, landed on my head, and went limp. I grabbed my shovel anyway.
How dare you mess with my cash flow?
The monster was still alive, damn it. Javier Asrahan, my white-haired swordsman, saw the opening and launched straight at the monster's armored body.
Now is my chance.
His blade carved down with everything he had, but the shell turned the strike aside in a burst of fire.
Impossible, I can't get through here either.
Javier's sword could not reach the Gigatitan's flesh, yet he stayed unnervingly calm.
I thought it could withstand this, but now I don't see a way.
Then he understood why.
It's because Master Lloyd came back.
2.5 minutes earlier, Peepadong had already been racing across the battlefield. Peepadong bounced through the ruins while the Gigatitan searched for him, and I barked.
Peepadong, don't get us too close.
That evasive run bought Javier another chance to hit the shell, but Mana Blast was still having absolutely no effect. So what was this armor actually made of? I activated Survey and scanned the monster while Peepadong kept moving.
Nice, even living things are made out of some sort of matter.
The readout exposed a mixture of dentin and chitin, packed into a whipping 1-meter-thick layer. That was armor built to eat damage. The scan confirmed it.
That's really a state-of-the-art armor.
Javier drove another attack into the shell, and the impact still failed to break through. Then the display caught something worse. Energy from his shock wave was migrating toward one spot.
What is that?
The Gigatitan collected attack energy in its hollow horn, then released it as one shot.
First thing we need to do is cut off that horn.
Simulation mode mapped the weak structure inside it. That mechanic was broken because every failed attack became ammunition.
We can destroy that thing.
Javier heard the plan and immediately called out the danger.
You have lost all control of yourself.
I pointed at the target.
Horn its horn, cut off its horn, man.
Javier launched skyward, but the Gigatitan's charged blast met him head-on. Even a clean cut could turn fatal. I, Lloyd Frontera, had a plan D after surveying the Gigatitan, but it was moving faster than expected.
We're going with plan A plus D.
I called. Peepadong carried me toward the shore while I ordered Javier to lure the monster east, into the woods. I bought the defenders time, and that had to be enough.
I'm counting on you, Count.
I shouted as Peepadong sped me away. 15 minutes earlier, Count Cremo had watched the Gigatitan wreck the waterfront and blamed himself for trusting a single bronze statue to stop it. From Peepadong's back, I saw the Gigatitan drag itself ashore, obsessed with the bronze statue.
Javier and I will buy you time.
I told Count Cremo. The monster came straight at Javier, which was exactly the distraction I needed, although my swordsman had no room for error. Javier barely kept ahead of the Gigatitan's jaws, and exhaustion finally caught him.
My mission is to lure it away, for the people.
He gasped, then forced his legs to keep moving. That was the ugly part of a lure. It only worked while the bait stayed alive. Javier ran until he could barely breathe, then Count Cremo roared.
Let's give it up, everyone, for the one, the only bronze statue.
Wheels rattled into place around the giant decoy. The Gigatitan's glowing horn reacted immediately. Good, its fixation was about to become our weapon. Javier saw the trap at last.
You stinking lobster, I brought you your real enemy.
I yelled from Peepadong's back as the statue rolled in. The Gigatitan roared at it, and I grinned. Count Cremo's crew had rebuilt the decoy exactly when I needed it.
Next time, explain the whole plan to me.
Javier snapped while I sprinted beside him. Fair complaint. The Gigatitan charged the bronze statue with Peepadong and its load directly underneath, so I threw myself clear as that enormous body thundered down. With the Gigatitan committed to the statue, Javier launched himself into its underside.
Mana blast,
he shouted, driving compressed mana through his sword. That move was broken because it delivered force past the shell instead of asking the shell for permission. The impact detonated inside the monster's body. Mana blast had cracked King Storma's hide, but the hole was nowhere near enough to finish him. I watched Javier Srahan drop through the smoke, still refusing to call it a win.
I'm not strong enough to protect the people,
he admitted.
You did it, Javier.
I called, he did not bite. King Storma's cracked chest was still moving, which made that earlier blast a brutal opening rather than a finish. Javier Srahan took one look at the monster and shouted,
Leave the rest to me.
I answered from above,
To me.
Then I threw myself straight at the problem. No elegant plan left. Everything I had left went into that last mana blast, and Lloyd Frontera was finally losing consciousness. Yet I could rest easy.
Leave it to me.
I heard the charge below, while Javier trusted me because I had said it with absurd confidence. Then something huge, round, and yellow came crashing in. Hamang slammed into King Storma like a living cannonball, and I yelled,
Rest easy, Javier. I'll protect this city, no matter what.
The monster was still too durable to finish cleanly, but it had already been blasted into the air. Peepadong panted below, that mattered. I saw Peepadong hesitate beneath the airborne giant lizard, so I gave the only order that mattered.
Peepadong now.
He squealed and launched himself forward, then rammed King Storma hard enough to send cracks through its body. What could the tiny guy pull off now? Apparently a lot. Peepadong had survived a few attacks with Mana Blast before, so I gambled on stacking that same technique again.
Let's level up a little heart circle.
The system answered with double heart circle level 4, then level 5. Each upgrade raised the RP price. That was the trap. The next level demanded 370 RP, while I only had 311. Damn it, I told myself.
Nothing I can do now, I need to stay rational.
But King Storma was still there, and Javier was down inside Hamang's mouth. I raised my shovel anyway.
If there's even a little chance.
Javier Srahan's approval rating suddenly rose, and that pushed my current RP past the 370 I needed. The system displayed double heart circle level 10. I grinned through the sweat. I can do it. Triple heart circle began to level up, and the mana around me started to spark. Javier's faith literally bought me the RP to force this upgrade through, the kind of payoff I break down in a new recap every day. Subscribe if you want the mechanics behind why these clutch power spikes actually work. The system displayed Javier Srahan's Srahan core technique at triple heart circle level 1, and my mana amplification shot to 500% as a black spike tore across the battlefield. I, Lloyd Frontera, dodged.
One circle protects the heart.
A second circle started turning behind it. Something slammed into me hard enough to draw blood, and for one ugly second I lost the thread of the technique.
How did I get hit by something?
The circles kept moving anyway, one guarding my heart while the others tried to lock into place. My thoughts started slipping. The heart circles twisted together inside me, and that mattered because 3 mana loops could feed one attack without collapsing my core. They collided.
They are colliding.
Their merged force dragged me into a blazing spiral, with fire whipping around my body faster than I could steady myself. The collision stopped being a clean power-up and became a full-force detonation that hurled me through the air in a ring of fire.
Triple core mana blast.
King Storma became the airborne giant lizard from that opening sight, blasted into the shattered rock overhead while the ground below gave way. King Storma's landing detonated the cliff in a violent burst of fire, shredding stone into red-black fragments and punching a crater through the battlefield. The blast kept chewing through the rock. Even after the flame died down, jagged debris crashed across the ruined ground and smoke rose near the settlement. Shattered slabs continued falling around us, but the forest finally went still beneath the moon. My body would not move. Padong, Hamang, and Bangal crowded close while Javier Srahan stood over me, and the strain on his face made the victory feel suddenly expensive. Javier Srahan and the summons stood among the wreckage, staring at the spot where I had fallen as Padong urgently tried to lead them toward me. Then my hand twitched. My lord, Master Lloyd." The noise drew Javier's eyes down, and both of us froze when we finally faced each other. Javier Srahan dropped beside me and checked my body on the cold forest floor, his eyes widening as the summons watched from behind him. Nothing. Lloyd Frontera's heart has stopped. After all that fire and falling stone, the silence landed harder than the blast. Before the battlefield swallowed me, a messenger pigeon had landed at Frontera with a letter from Count Cremo. I took it from Padong and wondered what the Count wanted. The message was short, that made it worse. I bolted through the snow on horseback, yelling, "Lloyd, Lloyd," while Arcos Frontera's letter praised every construction job I had finished in Cremo City. It was an invitation from my father, and Marbella Frontera decided she was coming too. "I shall go with Sir Bayern alone." I learned that my parents rode out immediately, with Bayern guarding them through a blizzard. My father had spent years calling me an unsociable disappointment, so his sudden urgency felt suspiciously personal. Then his message reached Count Cremo. "I am sending this correspondence to inform you of the situation at once." Arcos Frontera had come seeking permission from his lord because he wanted to fulfill my request. "Fear not, my lord, it can be done." That confession hit hard because the man charging through the storm was finally treating me like his son. Then a monster's claws cut across the snow. The monster was enormous, fast, and already on top of the escort. Bayern tried to redirect everyone toward the shortcut. "Sir Bayern, you must run as well." He refused because the beast moved faster than horses and had their throats in reach. That was the whole problem. Bayern met the charging beast with his sword, while the others begged him to retreat. "Forgive us, Sir Bayern." The monster answered with a hiss and tore straight into the melee. Bayern's job was no longer winning. It was buying seconds for Arcos Frontera and Marbella Frontera. Bayern threw his blade first, then closed the distance before the monster could exploit the opening. That was smart defense, not flashy swordplay. A thrown sword forced its head away for one beat, and Bayern used that beat to drive a strike into its jaw. Still not enough. Bayern clung to his sword and screamed as the monster ripped him apart. "Lord." Even then, he forced one more slash through the snow and crashed the beast down. Marbella Frontera saw the opening from horseback, blade drawn, but the fight had already become far more desperate than anyone expected. I, Lloyd Frontera, lay motionless while 3 mana circles spun so violently that Javier Srahan could not even read my heart through their magnetic field. "A triple heart circle." He breathed. The rotation itself had replaced my heartbeat. That was the ugly brilliance of triple core mana blast. Power kept cycling even after my body should have quit. While workers cleared shattered buildings, Arcos Frontera, my father, hurried toward Count Cremo's manor with Marbella Frontera, my mother, Bayern, and Javier. "No, I was merely," father said, staring after Javier, "the sword that Master Lloyd was wielding." My parents had seen the Gigatitan fall, but they still had no idea what had actually carried me through it. My parents remembered how I had rushed at the Gigatitan and pulled people from the water, while survivors staggered out from beneath the rubble. I had sent Bangal ahead with one order. "Bangal, eat up that debris, make sure not to hurt anyone." Hamang then blasted water across the spreading flames. Cleanup had become rescue. A crowd gathered outside and prayed for the people they loved, each of them treating me like the person who had saved everyone. I stayed unconscious in Count Cremo's manor. The prayers were sincere. Then one voice cut through the crowd with a very different opinion. "Have all of you lost your senses?" While I lay unconscious, a town pot stirrer tried pinning the destruction on the man who built the statue platform. Ultimately, it's all his fault. The public was already furious, so they shut him down fast. Then my chest began to thump, and a blue-white pulse burst through the dark. Something inside me had restarted. The system pinged as I woke, calling my courage and sacrifice an achievement that had moved the people of Cremo and promising a huge reward. My head hurt like hell.
Am I alive right now? Probably, if you were dead, you wouldn't be able to even have a dream.
Fair enough, the system told me to check on something more important first. Javier entered with his sword in hand, and I could finally see that he had made it back in one piece.
Oh, Javier, just the man I wanted to see.
My first question was still the construction payment, naturally. Javier looked me over and answered,
"It seems you are in good health, my lord."
Then my family came rushing in. My family crushed me in a hug before I could explain a thing.
"Lord, you are okay, you scoundrel."
They had spent days thinking I was gone. Relief 1. Far away in the royal capital Magenta, Count Cremo's letter confirmed the Gigatitan had been completely destroyed.
That concludes Count Cremo's letter.
When the Count agreed to my special compensation, I, Lloyd Frontera, took his hand with a smile and watched the poor man realize he had just been extorted. Still, he could not bring himself to hate me. Then the carriage arrived, and Cremo's crowd was already chanting my name. Pressure. Lovely. The Count had prepared a podium and a magic crystal ball that would amplify my voice, then politely suggested I praise the people who survived the disaster.
"Of course,"
I said. The crowd's chant rolled through the hall as I set my hand on the crystal ball and faced a ridiculous number of potential customers. I asked Cremo's citizens whether they had ever heard of Ondal Floor, the heating construction that warmed a home from beneath its floor. Silence. Then I called out every aching joint and every child catching cold beside a fire.
1 hour, I shouted. 2 hours.
Their wasted time was the sales pitch. I drove the point home. 50 years of winter fires meant 15 years burned away in front of them.
If you think that is too much time, remember Ondal flooring.
The practical value was the broken part. Once people saw warmth as reclaimed life, the Frontera barony had something nobody could ignore.
That is all,
I said, and walked away from the podium while the crowd fell quiet. Behind me, the Count finally understood why his irritation had curdled into respect. I hunted every penny, yes, but I was persistent, reasonable, and capable enough that he wanted me at his side. Fair assessment. Back at Frontera, I looked over the estate's most senior knight, Bayern. He was honest, sincere, and sadly a little below average with a sword. Then he handed me migration plans, land allocation lists, and a response to farm owners demanding labor.
"I will send the orcs to bolster the mine."
I decided. Bayern reported that our discounted Ondal contracts would still clear more than 50% profit once coal sales were counted.
"You did all that while I was gone?"
I asked. He had also kept the repairs moving, and an inspector called him to a finished house. The man had been busy. Bayern inspected the finished work and praised the crew before telling them they were now the most important people on our traveling build team. I was stunned. That was real management, the kind that made workers want to carry the project themselves. The system announced Ondal flooring was complete, entered history as Frontera Heating, and awarded me 400 RP. The Ondal floor contracts had spread through every baron and baroness, so I put the next bottleneck in front of Javier Srahan.
"We need a storage building large enough for all this coal."
Construction had already paid off over half my debt, and our neighbors' water fees kept rolling in. Retirement was getting dangerously close. Javier looked ready to punch me for enjoying that plan a little too much, when a horn cut across the worksite.
What was that noise?
I listened once and knew it.
The royal messenger's arrival horn.
Then their banner came over the road. That was not a casual visit. The royal messenger made his entrance like the road itself owed him applause, landing on the carpet and spinning his staff before snapping the royal banner open. Everyone clapped. I did not.
"Get to the point already,"
I muttered, because a performance this elaborate usually carried expensive news. The messenger praised the kingdom's rulers and finally reached the useful part. Count Cremo's Gigatitan disaster had put me and Javier on the royal family's notice.
"The 2 valiant heroes will be personally greeted and praised."
The system flashed a reward too. Favor with the Baron rose by 9 plus 90 RP. Damn it. That order dragged me back to my life as Suho Kim, when a superior treated civil engineering like a personal wish-granting machine.
Make us a sauna over there.
I built it too well, then every complaint and every absurd request came straight to Corporal Kim. That was the trap. Competence attracts work. The royal messenger made it official. Lloyd Frontera and my guard were ordered to the royal capital immediately. My stomach dropped. Once Her Highness noticed someone, that person stayed on her radar forever.
I should have built a sea platform and stopped there.
I thought, but pretending to be useless would only make this worse. The royal carriage rumbled toward the palace while I sat there feeling like a man awaiting execution. Javier caught it immediately.
You have the face of a man who is about to be executed.
Fair.
You have a sharp eye.
I admitted, because the royal capital had finally put us within reach of the real problem. Inside the royal palace, Javier and I knelt until we were told to rise. Then Her Highness appeared, and her charisma nearly hit me harder than any monster. Javier had been right. I knew her personality, her future, and the state of the capital.
Let's squeeze this opportunity for everything it has.
Magenta, the royal capital's highest ruler, called me forward and said,
Have you come to say that you are the most fitting ruler of this land?
Her gaze slid past me to Javier Osrahan.
From your air alone, I can tell you are no ordinary man.
I asked Javier,
Did you sense that mana flow?
He had. Damn, I had just met one of this kingdom's only 2 sword masters, so cheap flattery was dead on arrival. Magenta had heard that I, Lloyd Frontera, was supposedly the perfect candidate, but she shut down the praise with,
I do not judge a man on others' recommendations. I trust what I see myself.
Fair enough, she would test my construction skill personally. That was the real prize. If I impressed Magenta, I could win a direct contract from the crown instead of scraping together estate jobs. Magenta asked,
What construction project does Magenta need most urgently?
She was testing whether I understood the capital, not whether I could swing a shovel. I knew the future of this world from Night of Blood and Iron, so I answered.
The most urgent project is a new bridge.
Her palace was visibly crumbling, which made that answer sound ridiculous at first. That was exactly why it mattered. Magenta's expression did not soften.
And your reason?
My answer had missed the obvious repair, but I could see she was still listening. Magenta was powerful, fair, and famous for hearing every class of citizen out before deciding. Anyone else would have demanded I fix the palace first. She wanted to know whether I had a better argument than the safe one. Magenta explained that a bad-tempered dragon had carried off a tower long ago, leaving the palace structure slowly failing.
Repairs would only delay the collapse.
She said her own answer was to rebuild the foundations and pillars beneath it. I understood the trap immediately. A palace repair protected stone, the bridge I chose protected people, and that was why my answer had irritated her. Magenta snapped.
Are you toying with me?
A dragon's roar flashed through my mind, but I held my ground.
Never. The river bridge has been rebuilt 12 times, and it keeps collapsing under seasonal floods.
That was the broken mechanic here. Rebuilding the same weak design reset the damage without fixing the load path. I promised a bridge that would stand through spring floods and drifting ice. I finally named it.
I am talking about a modern suspension bridge.
The design in my head used towers and hanging cables to spread the load, instead of asking one rigid span to survive every flood alone. Magenta studied me in silence, then said,
Tell me more about this bridge you will construct.
Nice. I had found the one subject that made the queen forget her irritation. I kept explaining the suspension bridge while Magenta listened, and the future I knew pressed at the back of my mind. This was the queen who would eventually lose an arm and turn monstrous. Still, she asked,
And if that bridge fails?
I answered,
You can take my head, your majesty. In exchange, raise my family's station.
Magenta laughed softly. I had made her smile. As Lloyd Frontera, I stopped pretending this was a schoolyard scuffle and drove the bully straight through the floor. Every time he tried to rise, I planted him again. One clean hit would have made a point. Repeated slams made the entire room understand that his usual victims finally had backup. The red-haired student watching me thought, Lloyd, he's completely lost it. fair assessment. I had watched this rich kid terrorize people for too long, so I grabbed him again and asked,
You understand what's going on right now, do you?
He still tried to act superior. Bad move. He told me to stop acting like an asshole, which was rich coming from the guy getting corrected.
Want me to tell you why you're such an asshole?
I said, then kept hammering him into the wall. The punches were not flashy. Their purpose was worse. I was stripping away the confidence that made him think nobody could touch him. The red-haired student worried I might kill him. I looked back with a smile and said,
Don't worry, if he's dead, he can't bully you.
That landed exactly as hard as it should have. Then the bully reached for a sword, turning a deserved beating into a real threat. Swords drew around us, and the academy crowd demanded to know why I was attacking one of their own. I loosened my grip and gave them the polite version.
Let me introduce myself. I am Lloyd Frontera, the eldest son of Baron Arcos Frontera.
Calm was a weapon here. It forced everyone else to reveal how rattled they were. With blades aimed at me and the bully unconscious at my feet, I bowed like I had interrupted dinner.
I'd like to apologize for causing such a commotion. I was merely attempting to restore His Majesty's honor.
The academy staff called it ludicrous. Meanwhile, the victim's brother finally pushed through the crowd, furious and confused. The room spelled out the stakes for me. The academy staff were nobles who treated their own classmates like livestock, and anyone outside that circle got bullied into silence. His brother wanted to punish me for the insult. I opened my coat and reached inside. The crowd stopped breathing. I produced the royal invitation. That's a royal guest, the staff realized, and suddenly their confidence evaporated. Royal light wrapped around me as the summons took hold, forcing the academy to recognize who had called for me. I gave the red-haired student one last instruction.
If we punish bullies, treat the beat-up students better.
At the royal capital, I watched the royal court stop treating my suspension bridge like a harmless construction project.
Starting with the guild.
I decided because the magenta bridge had collapsed under cargo wagons and made the crown look weak. That failure was deliberate. Someone had paid for it. I recognized the setup from Night of Blood and Iron. The royal army and rebels were supposed to clash at the Magenta River, but the delayed bridge had locked the conflict in a bloody stalemate. So when the queen asked for my view, I skipped the polite answer.
How much were you paid?
I laid out the scam before anyone could shout me down. Either the royal side or the business side had funded the guild leader, then they took construction money and blamed the missing budget. Lloyd Frontera had cornered him with motive, means, and a very public accusation.
You made a grave mistake.
The queen warned. The queen ordered an immediate judgment, and I dropped to my knees with the executioner already raising his blade behind me. That was the price of accusing a royal official without proof. Brutal timing.
I shall restore my honor,
she declared until an elderly noble stepped forward and stopped the spectacle cold. When the old man asked for my last words, I bowed and gave him the answer that mattered.
Exterminate the guilty one's entire bloodline.
The court froze, then the queen demanded agreement from her officials. They gave it. That meant her promise of justice had teeth now. The queen refused to execute me first.
I shall prove my vassal's innocence,
she said, and every official who had backed the guild leader suddenly looked ill. Then she called for the confession spell. That was bad news for conspirators because magic did not care how expensive their lies were. The confession spell flared around the accused, and I got my proof while the guild leader cracked into helpless laughter. Their families were dragged in too, tied high on wooden posts beneath circling crows.
Your families planned this,
the queen announced. Suddenly, my bridge problem had become a purge. With the traitors exposed, I watched the kingdom throw its workers and high wizards behind my bridge, using gravitation magic to make tower blocks light enough to place fast. That was the real construction buff. It removed the lifting bottleneck, not the engineering. Then Bangle readied the promised airborne giant lizard.
Fire.
I, Lloyd Frontera, watched Peepadong's cable rocket over the sky and snap into the tower socket. That connection mattered because a suspension bridge only works once both towers share the load through its main cables. Peepadong slammed down beside the mechanism, and the socket locked tight. One cable was in. The crowd already saw the second one coming. Javier Asrahan watched beside Master Julian, who had shown up for hard labor every day despite being new to it.
You are incredible, Master Julian.
Javier told him. Julian remembered nearly hurting himself with a sword as a child, but he gripped its hilt anyway. Down below, Hammond carried the bridge deck through the water while fire magic scorched attackers. My boot hit the ground, and I finally got to say it.
Construction complete.
Magenta City's suspension bridge stood finished across the river, and the system dumped 1,050 bonus RP into my total for the monumental build. Saved points had become 3,019 RP. Then the Queen named it Lodgevi and called me a
Master Builder.
The bridge could pull in construction money and finally ease Frontera's debts, so the payoff was real. Still, I spotted the Queen studying me like a new tool in her arsenal.
I refused to spend my days eating and sleeping.
I told myself her request came next. Naturally, it involved returning to the royal palace. My plan was simple on paper: escape the Queen's grip while solving Julian's academy problem. The Queen had other ideas.
As you wish, Your Highness.
I answered, grinning as I accepted the job. 2 problems at once, fine by me. Operation Double Kill had officially begun. At the royal palace, Queen Alicia Termina Magentano offered me a noble title and an estate suited to my abilities. Officials were already sour about rewarding the son of a country baron who had exposed high-ranking criminals.
We give thanks for Your Majesty's boundless generosity.
Javier Asrahan and I answered. Then I asked for something bigger. The Queen narrowed her eyes.
Bigger, you say? Speak.
I asked her to withdraw the land and title if my request proved reasonable, which made her suspect I wanted a royal post or more money. Nope. What I want is a thorough cleansing of the Royal Academy. Her expression changed fast. I laid out the rot plainly. Cliques ruled students, lower ranks suffered, and teachers ignored it while taking kickbacks. The academy had abandoned why it existed. Javier Asrahan presented 4 months of testimony from graduates, workers, and teachers who had quit rather than feed the corruption.
We carefully recorded their claims.
He said now the Queen had proof. The Academy's nobles panicked and screamed that I was lying, but the Queen cut through the noise.
Anyone who opened their mouth will face the confession spell.
That mattered because the spell did not care about rank, money, or rehearsed excuses. The room went silent, then Her Majesty arrived. With the guilty exposed, the Queen marched through the Academy and delivered the sentence herself. Arrest every accomplice, lash them according to their crimes, and confiscate their lands. One noble begged, "Spare me, I was framed." Nobody bought it. Master Julian praised the cleanup, while Javier Asrahan immediately sensed something was off. A smug courtier laughed because the Queen had apparently forgotten an old plan. Then a royal messenger delivered an invitation for me to attend tomorrow night's banquet. The message came with a warning that she had receipts. That was suspicious. When the king's top sword master offered his help, I could only watch him stroll away like he owned the place. Javier Asrahan and I spotted the king's top sword master approaching, and his presence alone made the nearby night uneasy.
That is Sir Kyle, the kingdom's top sword master.
Meanwhile, Julian Frontera finally asked why I had planned to trap Queen Alicia Termina Magentano with construction work. I had a justification. It was just not a comforting one. Julian Frontera smiled and told me, "You are my brother, I trust you." The system immediately showed why that kindness mattered. His approval rating rose by 65 points, handing me 910 bonus RP and pushing my total to 3,929. Relationship rewards were nasty because genuine trust kept converting into construction resources. Then the banquet music started. At the banquet, the Queen raised her wineglass and called me over.
"Lloyd Frontera, come draw near."
I praised her sharp judgment, and she answered by comparing me to a mole cricket. Brutal. Javier Asrahan stood nearby while the Queen repeated her order, making it very clear that pretending not to hear was no longer an option. The Queen kept saying,
"Closer."
Each step turned my nerves tighter, until Queen Alicia Termina Magentano leaned in and kissed me without warning.
"Forgive me, Your Highness, if I go any closer."
I managed. She told me she had everything ready for me. That was somehow worse. That kiss snapped my brain straight back to its natural setting.
I want to get back to construction already.
I burst into a ridiculous dance beside the banquet table while the Queen watched with open amusement. Her plan was simple: keep the banquet going until moonset, Wait, I knew that line. The danger had started with a royal poison, the kind reserved for plots against a queen, and its return made no sense because the people who knew it were meant to be gone for 3 years. Then the report tightened the noose.
It is coming from Sir Kyle.
That name mattered. Queen Alicia Termina Magentano had been resting after working herself sick, worrying over food supplies and Isfahan's military buildup, while an old man named Samarkand assembled forces in the west.
I have been working too hard these past few days.
The palace was calm, briefly. The map showed why Queen Alicia had been tense. Isfahan's western border met Magentano through a wilderness corridor, and an army was marching there on what looked like a suicide mission. Back in her room, she clutched her chest.
I can't control my mana heart.
Her breathing turned ragged. Queen Alicia collapsed over the table and recognized the attack for what it was.
Poison, it's poison.
That was the nightmare mechanic. The toxin had slipped past every checked meal and went straight for her mana heart, the mana organ keeping her alive. She called for help as the room began to blur. Sir Kyle arrived while Queen Alicia could barely stand, offering exactly the help a dying ruler needed.
Give me your hand.
She trusted the kingdom's top sword master, and he drove his blade into her instead. Damn. I saw the assassination for what it was the moment Javier Isfahan, and I heard the disturbance. Javier Isfahan felt the same oppressive mana I did, so I gave him the only assignment that mattered.
Knock out the sword master.
He wanted time instead.
3 minutes.
Fair enough. Javier sprinted through the palace, snatched up a falling candlestick, and turned furniture into an emergency weapon. Javier and I reached a corridor littered with bodies just as Sir Kyle pressed Queen Alicia with another red aura strike. She blocked it anyway.
You have had a lethal dose of poison, yet you blocked 3 strikes by my blade.
Even dying, her royal mana had defended her on instinct. Sir Kyle raised his sword over Queen Alicia, but Javier dove in and caught the killing blow with a candlestick. Steel met wood.
He blocked my sword with a candlestick.
That was not luck. Javier had redirected a sword master's force without drawing his own blade. Javier Isfahan drove his mana circles into a high-frequency collision, turning his blade into a storm of blue impacts that kept Sir Kyle from simply cutting us down.
High-frequency mana circle collision.
Javier shouted. Sir Kyle met every strike anyway. That was terrifying.
I've never seen mana used like that before.
I heard him admit as Javier's control kept escalating. The clashing mana tore through the royal palace, while Queen Alicia Termina Magentano called out.
Lloyd, what are you doing here?
I had no time to explain. Javier pinned her down and invoked the Isfahan core technique, drawing the poison-like mana from her body before launching himself straight back at Sir Kyle. Sir Kyle's purple aura sword came out, and that raised the fight from dangerous to terminal.
Only a sword master can conjure it.
I realized the thing was broken because it gave his sword a reach far beyond steel itself. Javier vaulted clear of the forming blade and fired a golden strike at him instead. Javier Isfahan answered with mana blast, throwing fire across the hall hard enough to make Sir Kyle acknowledge him.
Your technique and manipulation of mana is ingenious.
Then Sir Kyle stepped through the blast and slammed Javier aside.
You lack real-life combat experience.
Damn, he had found the gap between talent and survival. Sir Kyle's counter sent Javier's blood across his coat, and I saw the smile disappear from the fight.
Javier,
I shouted. Sir Kyle pressed a glowing hand into Queen Alicia Termina Magentano and snarled.
I'm counting on you. If you lose, we're all dead.
He was forcing the entire outcome onto Javier's wounded shoulders. Javier Isfahan was bleeding, but he called the wound shallow and charged Sir Kyle before the man could dictate the pace.
Now it's time for my attack.
Sir Kyle barked, then watched Javier rush him without hesitation. I knew that look. Javier had decided that backing off would only make the next hit worse. Sir Kyle slipped past Javier's charge and cut him again, so Javier finally yelled.
Master Pipadong.
Pipadong spun through the air beside a gold coil, whipping up a brutal gust that shoved the swordsman off balance. It was not a finisher. It was better right then. One opening, bought at exactly the moment Javier needed it. Sir Kyle threw his sword up to guard, but Javier Strahan had already read the opening Peapod created. His mana blast crashed down in a towering column of fire and swallowed the hall in light.
Mana blast.
Javier roared. Sir Kyle's face finally tightened. Good, he had stopped treating us like targets. My name was Lloyd Frontera, and Sir Kyle was blown through the royal palace by Javier's mana blast, yet he still twisted in midair to cut through the pressure with his aura sword.
Can I use that cannon? Unbelievable.
He shouted as another blast hammered him down. The strike rattled the hull. Sir Kyle got up anyway. Sir Kyle answered by raining scatter blast after scatter blast across the hall, forcing me to watch fire chew through every safe path around him.
Ugh, damn it, he's a monster.
He snarled, yet the queen lay in the middle of the chaos, and Javier was pressed to her side, drawing in mana while she whispered.
Ugh, how is it possible?
Queen Alicia Termina Magentano asked.
He is absorbing mana, but only the mana he was connected to.
I said,
please don't talk, I can't concentrate.
While Javier's mana concentration drew power from her and left everything else untouched. That control kept the queen alive.
Forgive me, your highness, please stay still and rest,
Javier said before coughing blood. Sir Kyle staggered through the smoke and found the palace guards staring at the wreckage.
Listen up, soldiers, that man is going to assassinate the queen.
I saw the lie land exactly where he wanted it. The guard rushed Javier and he answered with the aura sword, cutting their charge apart before a single strike finally drove him to his knees. Bleeding and surrounded, Javier had to survive the royal soldiers without giving Sir Kyle the opening he wanted.
Every one of these men is elite guard,
Sir Kyle said.
Their strength is at least 3 at a time.
Javier brought up his sword anyway.
But that will never happen.
Sir Kyle lifted his blade.
Step aside, he is mine now because he will die here.
Javier had already been cut down once, but he kept his sword between Sir Kyle and the queen.
If we were to attain sword master status,
Sir Kyle said,
we would easily rule the nation.
Javier refused to budge.
But that will never happen.
Then Sir Kyle's mana gathered into a towering pink blade.
He is mine now. The aura sword.
I realized as Javier took Sir Kyle's pink blade head-on instead of backing off. Their collision painted the hall in blinding magenta, and both men slid across the shattered floor with their swords still locked. I could only watch Javier plant his feet and keep the line from breaking. No retreat. The locked blades finally burst apart, and a pillar of pink force ripped straight through the royal palace, flinging Javier clear before smoke swallowed the floor. Sir Kyle walked out of it with his sword drawn. Then I saw the cost. Javier lay bloodied against the broken tiles, still gripping his weapon while Sir Kyle closed the distance. Poison absorption finally completed, but I barely had time to enjoy it before the red-haired mage buckled and vomited black poison.
If you don't do something, you will die.
I shoved him toward the only answer I could see.
Gather every last bit of mana in your left arm.
The pressure was brutal. I saw the caster drop to his knees, clasp his hands, and scream.
Mana blast.
That pink mana did not spread like a normal spell. It compressed into one violent lance, which made every scrap of power matter at the exact point of impact. Then it tore upward. The blast crossed the sky and slammed into the red-domed structure below, cracking the air around it in a violet spiral. I could see debris burst from the impact point. That was the entire gamble. One concentrated shot had to break through before the mana ran dry. I saw the aftermath through a haze of blood and broken stone. A white-haired swordsman lay torn apart on the floor while a red-haired attacker strode closer, sword in hand. Then that same voice roared.
Mana blast.
And the spell surged again, no restraint, just execution. The mana blast kept climbing, then crashed into the same dome target hard enough to throw pink smoke across the sky. Arcos Frontera, my father, stared at the wounded Javier Strahan and asked,
Lloyd, did I hit him?
I watched Javier stagger back up. He was still breathing. Javier Strahan stood with blood pouring down his chest, yet his hand still gripped his sword. Arcos studied him and said,
Here I was thinking you would be blown away.
Javier did not fold.
I swore an oath.
Even shaking, he tightened his weapon and promised to keep it. Later, Javier and I sat beside a fire, and he finally put the real grievance on the table.
I am supposed to be your guard. You abandoned my units and ran to the Gigatitan.
He had every right to be furious, I answered.
Don't get too worked up about it.
Javier gave me 3 months to negotiate, then rejected my apology without blinking.
No,
Fair enough, I poked the fire and said.
you are my lord. I will not abandon my subordinates again.
He called that promise childish, but I had already decided.
Those are some mighty words.
By the fire, Javier Esrahan, my white-haired swordsman, stopped me cold.
Listen to me.
He explained that every human had a limit, and forcing your mana past that threshold could kill you before it made you stronger.
I will not rely on Master Lloyd anymore.
Damn, Javier was betting his life on reaching Sword Master. Sir Kyle, the kingdom's top sword master, answered Javier's decision by dropping through the hall with pink mana blazing around him.
You never cease to amaze me.
He saw Javier compress every scrap of mana into one point, a shortcut that strengthened the strike while shredding the body producing it.
But now you must die.
I watched pink fire pour through Javier as Sir Kyle closed the distance, and the old swordsman finally understood the cost of Javier's gamble.
You fool, what are you doing?
Javier kept feeding mana into his sword, his hands, his heart, and his mana heart. There was no safe reserve left.
From his hands.
Javier drove that same mana deeper.
From his heart, from his mana heart.
Then a blue-white core flared above us, and the energy snapped back into Javier's blade instead of exploding inside him. That was the nasty mechanic here. He turned his whole body into the channel, so the sword got everything at once. Sir Kyle knocked Javier down and checked for the finish, because no normal swordsman should have survived that output.
I sensed neither breathing nor mana from him.
He turned his back on Javier, big mistake. The moment Kyle tried to leave, he froze and whispered.
What?
Javier rose beneath a pillar of green light and pulled a new blade out of the ground.
The sword master's mana.
Sir Kyle could not believe it. An aura sword was mana forged solid enough to cut like steel, which meant Javier had not copied a technique. He had forced open the rank itself. I saw Javier's green aura sword surge across the hall like a vertical flood, while Sir Kyle threw pink power into its path and got buried anyway. No finesse, just force. The important part was that Javier's sword kept its shape through the collision, so Kyle could not simply scatter the mana and walk away. When the blast cleared, Sir Kyle was bleeding on the floor as the elite guard rushed toward him. Javier stood over the mess with his aura sword still burning green.
Step forward.
Nobody did.
If any of you think you can take on this sword master.
That threat landed because they had just watched him beat one. Poison had dropped Javier Esrahan flat, so I grabbed his hands and told him.
Take my mana.
He forced his eyes open and snapped.
I can't lose such a talent as you.
The system pinged with complete poison resistance, then offered supercharge, a mana dump that could turn my surroundings into fuel. That looked suspiciously useful. Javier grinned at the upgrade, which was bold for a man still lying on the carpet. I smacked his forehead and barked.
You messed with your mana, you idiot.
His face had gone wrong in a way I hated seeing. Supercharge could absorb huge amounts of mana, but it only lasted a day. Javier's body suddenly floated as blue light gathered over his chest. The room went quiet. Then the mana heart began spinning like a tiny star, pulling loose mana into one violent knot.
Supercharge.
I muttered. The skill was broken because it did not merely refill a pool. It converted nearby mana into raw output. That blue surge tore through the room, smashing furniture and rattling the windows while I shouted.
Lloyd Frontera.
Javier could still hear me through it. When the light finally thinned, I knelt beside him and said,
Save my life, take all the mana you need.
He rose again, wrapped in power. The blast faded and I found Javier unconscious on the ruined floor while the room slowly stopped glowing. Then the system rang out.
Skill upgrade.
My mana heart skill had climbed to a new low-ranking sword expert level, and Frenzy appeared beside it. I had gained a berserker mode with a brutal 10-second window. My body felt solid again, but Javier took one look at the wreckage and demanded,
What happened? Did I do that?
The queen screamed at us to hurry, then pressed closer and whispered,
Could you carry me?
I hated the timing, but her safety was our biggest priority, so I hauled her up and ran. With the queen on my back, I threw myself down the shattered hull.
Wait for me, Javier, I'm coming.
I called. Javier had displayed monocircle collision on his own, and I needed to see whether that trick could save us again. At the far end, a sword glow waited, then I heard it.
Javier.
A swordsman stood ahead with a glowing green aura sword, and he had already put Sir Kyle down. The man remarked,
I see he took down Kyle.
Behind me, the queen ordered.
Guards, lower your weapons.
That was no ordinary blade. An aura sword meant its user could forge mana into a weapon, and that made every guard in this room irrelevant. I watched the queen plant herself before the bruised hull and order the guards.
Show your respect to these two heroes.
Every banquet guest faced an investigation, while Javier Srahan calmly held his green aura sword. I, Lloyd Frontera, asked,
Did you really become a sword master? I suppose.
Javier answered, because protecting me was apparently his whole job. Relief barely landed before the system announced.
Compliment system activated.
It had converted my past achievements into honorific titles, then promised compliment points, or CP, every full moon. That sounded goofy until the mechanics clicked. Each title carried a bonus skill and territory-based effects.
Give me something cool.
I snapped, staring at the insulting list. I checked the title marked Your Toast, Cremo Lobster, the system stated.
Iron Stance is invoked.
Against an enemy 10 times heavier, doubling damage dealt and having damage received. That was busted because it turned a weight disadvantage into a stat check I was built to win. My CP balance, 0, naturally. A blank blue window suddenly blocked half my face. I froze as the palace slipped into darkness around me, and the answer stayed completely hidden from view. After that exhausting investigation, I sagged into a sofa while the young royal attendant brought the ugly update. Sir Kyle's contacts were protected from the Queen's confession spell.
Do we have any idea who was behind Sir Kyle?
I asked, no answer. Worse, the story in Night of Blood and Iron had already veered 3 years early. Even with fresh powers, the system still teased an ending spoiler I couldn't reach. When I asked about Javier Srahan, I learned the Queen had summoned him alone after he became a sword master.
100 guardsmen still aren't enough.
I said. The attendant finally understood why that meeting mattered. I watched Queen Alicia Termina Magentano offer Javier Srahan the vacant captaincy of the Royal Guard, and the whole room held its breath.
Stand by my side,
she ordered. Javier bowed instead.
Forgive me, Your Majesty, but I am Baron Arcos Frontera's knight.
His loyalty had just become a crime-shaped problem. I watched Queen Alicia Termina Magentano make it plain that refusing her order meant treason.
I am not asking you, I am ordering you.
Javier Srahan requested only time to send Arcos Frontera a farewell, then fell on her mercy. She called it an elegant way to choose death over serving her. Javier Srahan lowered his head after the Queen let him refuse the Royal Guard.
You may go, I shall respect your wishes.
He thanked her, then walked away from the throne room, while the royal officials could only watch. Javier made the choice painfully clear.
I will always be a baron of the Frontera family.
The Queen gave him a tired smile, admitting she never seemed to have luck with people from those parts. That loyalty had just beaten royal power. Later, I, Lloyd Frontera, lay under a full moon and checked my system rewards. At 22 compliment points, the blue window offered ending spoiler for 20 CP, a preview of my ending for almost everything I had earned.
Let's see.
I bought it.
Yes.
The system window immediately went black, then acted like a haunted message box while flames flooded over the screen.
What the hell, why is the text so spooky?
This was not a reward, it was a warning. The vision dropped me into Frontera Estate under a blood-red sky, with houses and trees coated in ash. I searched the burning streets and demanded an answer from the silent message box.
Tell me, what kind of ending is this?
Nothing answered. Then I saw the Baron and Baroness lying in the ruined estate, and the nightmare stopped being abstract. A survivor broke down beside them, crying that he had arrived too late to protect anyone. Lloyd Frontera had paid 20 CP to watch home die. Rage hit me hard enough to drown out everything else.
Damn it, what kind of ending is this?
I screamed as a black swarm gathered above the ruined land, blotting out the red sky. The threat had a shape now, and it was enormous. The black mass poured downward with a hiss, and monstrous red eyes opened inside it. I could only watch the swarm consume the ruined horizon as the vision kept tightening its grip. Ending spoiler was broken for one reason. It showed the cost before I could make the mistake.